Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
We are live on a Tuesday edition of the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform, YouTube at Mike Gill Show. What's up, everybody? Well, I hate the bye week sometimes, but sometimes you need it. Sometimes you need it to get some perspective. We'll try to do it here on the Sports Bash today. Baseball playoffs underway. Phillies waiting to see who they'll play on Saturday. And, of course, you can listen to all the baseball playoffs, Phillies, right here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll have the Mets and Brewers tonight, followed by the Padres and the Braves. You can listen to both of those games on 97.3 ESPN. Let me throw you out the number to get involved in today's show on the text board, 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. I want to start the day off with this. Yesterday, Sal Paolantonio was on the show last night. If you missed it, you can go back and check it out on the YouTube or the X platform and just go to the 5 o'clock hour. And we had the conversation regarding a comment that Jalen Hurts said. And Hurts was asked after the game whether or not him and Nick Sirianni are, talking about the identity of the team and what he thinks about where this team kind of is. And, it's clear that one of the things you hold the head coach accountable for is the accountability that the head coach puts on his team. Players throughout the locker room, Jalen Hurts was saying that you, Nick Sirianni, have taken personal accountability. And then after the Eagles game on Sunday night, the question was asked to Jalen Hurts whether or not him and Nick Sirianni get together and talk about accountability and identity and all those things. To which Jalen Hurts says, we have our moments. Did anybody else kind of pause and stop and say, well, that wasn't a ringing endorsement for the head coach? And some would take that as, okay, maybe him and the head coach don't get along, or maybe that was just an answer that Jalen Hurts doesn't like to give all that much. He plays his cards close to the vest, right? So I asked Sal Paolantonio on Monday's show what he thought about the answer that Jalen Hurts gave. The answer that was, we have our moments. Sal Paolantonio, I asked him, does he think there is a disconnect?
You and I are friends, right? We're not even the quarterback and the coach of the team. If I said to your producer, Josh, yeah, me and Mike, we have our moments.
Right.
Mike, that would be the dictionary definition of a disconnect.
So are we going down the path of this bye week of disconnects all over the place with this team? Look, you wait all year for the football season to get here. You wait and you wait and you wait. And then when it gets here, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, you're starting to already talk about disconnects. Are we starting to already look at the long view of this team and say, man, this is going to be a bumpy road. Man, this is not something that's fixable. Man, this is something that's not sustainable. Because Sal Paolantonio went on to say that Hurts should not have said what he said.
We have our moments.
Right.
What the heck? I mean, even if it's true, never say it publicly.
Exactly.
Say publicly, yeah, absolutely. We talk. We definitely talk. We go over everything. Me and the coaches, all the coaches, we go through everything.
Monday, we spent a lot of time talking about the game itself. As that game is now past us and moving forward, they need to find ways to fix this thing. listening to the quarterback come out and say, we have our moments, is not a ringing endorsement for this team if you think that the future is going to be brighter than the 4 games we saw in the past. You know, there's a lot of other moments that are happening with this team that are starting to get you a little concerned if you're a onlooker of the Philadelphia Eagles. One, Darius Slay posting on social media, hey, I had a great career so far, and then he had to delete it. Darius Slay showing up on the Micah Parsons show talking about how his own teammate, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, got cooked in a game in which he said he was going to put belt to rear end, and that didn't work out. Then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson having to retort to the fact that his own teammate called him out. Are we starting to go down a road that is just doesn't have any lighting on it? You know, today the coordinators spoke, and it was Vic Fangio's turn to come to the defense of some of his players, right? Vic Fangio today, he's the one that comes out. And look, Fangio has been the guy that we've been kind of listening to on these Tuesdays because he's the old curmudgeon-y coach. And, you know, we like to hear what the old guy says because he tells it like it is. Well, there's a lot of things that Fangio acknowledged today that he said the Buccaneers' quick, short passing game surprised the Eagles. Really? You didn't think the Buccaneers, because they did it to you last year, you don't think they watched your defense and saw your guys that far off the ball and said, hey, I have a great way to come out and beat this Eagles defense. Come out fast, quick, underneath, and make them tackle. This team stinks at tackling so far this year. Why don't we go with that game plan? You know, I'm not an offensive coordinator at the NFL level, but if I watch the Eagles on defense, I'd probably come up with a game plan that says short, quick passes and make them come up and have to tackle. Now, you would say, well, last week they did it against the Saints. Yeah, guess what? Prove you could do it again because I don't think you can. Vic Fangio also acknowledged something that I think is an interesting thing, to which he said, now, Fangio said by his count, the Eagles missed 15 tackles, which would tell you somewhere along the line, my team is not a very good tackling team. But I am a little perplexed that Fangio suggested that the Buccaneers' quick throws were not what they expected. What were you expecting? And who makes that decision? So that is something that I think is fundamentally needs to be figured out. Is Fangio making that decision on his own? Now, yesterday, Nick Sirianni said he went over every play with Vic Fangio and that they dissect these plays, and as a staff, they try to correct things. And Sirianni says that the fundamentals and the details will be fixed. And he says, I think the fundamentals on defense are tackling, block destruction, and how you get off blocks. All these things, which is funny because, you know, they had these problems in the Atlanta game, and then the next week they did get those fixed. And Sirianni even came out after the Saints game and said, oh, you didn't see Zach Bond get chop blocked this week because we practiced it last week. Okay, fine. One of the things that I found a little perplexing about what Fangio said today was that we kept telling our defensive backs that they were too far off the ball, but they weren't listening. Now, as a coach, I can kind of relate to this a little bit. You know, you coach a baseball team, you tell the first baseman, yo, move back. And then 2 plays later, the first baseman's right back to where you told him not to be, and you have to tell him every single play, yo, move back. Same with the shortstop, the third baseman. I like my third baseman up. He keeps drifting back. Why do you keep drifting back? So I can relate to this a little bit. Although I'm not paying my 13-year-old third baseman $28 million. So when I tell you as a corner to get up on the receivers closer, Fangio said today that we just didn't play good enough. Their pass offense was better than our pass defense. He said he didn't think his corners were tight enough, and he said it was communicated early in the game, but they weren't moving up. Now, this is another perplexing one. Fangio said that Reed Blankenship went into the game and he was sick, but that Fangio wasn't aware that he was sick. How did you get to game day and not know that your starting safety was sick, that he potentially had food poisoning, and that he had to leave the game in the first half because he was sick with possible food poisoning? How do you not know that? You know, Fangio was a guy that when they hired him to be the defensive coordinator, and it wasn't just me, there were a lot of fans out there that were mad, extra mad at John Gannon because it was perceived that the Eagles could have hired Fangio last year had Gannon not kind of screwed the Eagles over at the Super Bowl, because the fans wanted Fangio last year, and they ended up with Sean Desai, and that turned into a mess. Well, then this year they end up getting Fangio. Well, so far, Vic Fangio has been disappointing to me. Now, I want to like Vic Fangio. I want to like the fact that they got this guy who's supposedly going to hold people accountable and make this team, I don't want to say a great defensive team, but a competent defensive team. They were incompetent on Sunday. And yesterday, right here on the Sports Bash, when I asked the question, which guy am I pointing the finger at first and foremost, I got to say Vic Fangio's defensive scheme was terrible. Now, I do want to stress, I will always blame the players more than the coaches. And if you miss 15 tackles, that means you were in position to make 15 tackles. You just didn't do it. How's the game different if you actually execute the tackles? So I want to stress that big time. And Colin Thompson's going to join us at the bottom of the hour. And I know Colin, who played in the league, he will always tell you it's the Jimmies and Joes more than the X's and the O's. So I agree with him. But to me, Fangio is the face and the voice of the failure that we saw on Sunday, which was 15 missed tackles and, quite frankly, a scheme that I think was, as he just said today, we weren't really aware that they were going to do quick, short passes. That's a little perplexing because a lot of people were sitting in Atlantic County, Cape May County, Cumberland County, and the greater Delaware Valley who said, you know what they might do against this team? Because they've done it before. I watched it in the playoff game last year where they just absolutely shredded you up and down the field. So I don't know why this was a surprise to Vic Fangio, but I digress. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Mike from the Villas chimes in on the text board, says, Mike, Hurts and Sirianni both are in the lower echelon of their position. Fangio isn't far behind. He lost the locker room. It's obvious. Well, Mike from the Villas, so far the team is 2-2. We haven't seen a team hit rock bottom quite yet. At 2-2, this team has been average. But I am saying that I am trending towards the feeling of Hurts and Sirianni are more of an issue than I thought maybe entering the season. Look, to me, there's no way the front office could not have addressed this situation if they don't like each other. If these two guys have a disconnect or don't respect each other or don't like each other, I can't even come up with a word to think about how the front office and the ownership group could allow these two to enter a season together if there was any possibility that one or the other said, I cannot work with him or I do not respect him. If that wasn't hashed out at the beginning of the season, that's a tremendous problem. So I don't believe that these two guys were not ever talked to and said, hey, Coach Sirianni, what's your relationship like with Jalen Hurts? Well, you know, he's kind of tough to deal with sometimes. At that point, that's the end of it. That's it. You guys can't coexist. We lost 6 out of our last 7 games. I got to let you go. Now, Sirianni might have said, yeah, we're good. But when you go to Hurts, and if you ask him the question, Jalen, can you play for Coach Sirianni? Is this going to be a problem this year? And if Hurts pauses or gives you anything that would insinuate that he cannot play for Nick Sirianni, at that point, Sirianni's got to go after a 1-6 finish to the season. It's different if you won 6 out of 7 and Hurts says, yeah, you know what? I don't really care for Sirianni's antics too much, but we're winning. And no, you went 1-6. You had a window. You had an opening to say, if Jalen Hurts doesn't like playing for this guy, I have to move on. So I refuse to believe that did not take place. And if it did not take place, then you got bigger problems at the ownership and leadership level, which I don't think is plausible at this stage. I also, Mike in the Villas, I don't think Fangio is a guy who doesn't hold people accountable. I think Fangio, the problem might be, is that Fangio might be too old school holding people accountable, and that rubs people the wrong way.
To your first point about the front office, Mike, I just want to say that it would be professionally irresponsible if an owner who has been very involved in his coaches during his tenure here in Philadelphia and a GM who has basically all the power in the world, if they all of a sudden took a hands-off approach to the situation, that would be unprecedented and professionally irresponsible. To your second point about Fangio, you might be right because remember the Dolphins players were almost to a party when he left. So, I mean, there was literally jokes about why is Vic Fangio not on the in-season Hard Knocks with the Dolphins. So maybe there is something to say for the fact that Fangio is maybe a little too much on the players.
Yeah, I would say Fangio rubbing guys the wrong way would not surprise me. Mm-hmm. You get an old curmudgeon-y coach. I can definitely see that being something, that he is grinding these guys a little bit too much. I wouldn't be shocked by that. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Colin LBI says the word accountability has been extremely overused for NFL coaches. My team's coach is being questioned about it. What does holding someone accountable mean exactly? A coach can only yell so long, and benching someone fails 95% of the time because 95% of the time the backup is worse than the guy you benched. Put your players in a winning position is the main job. The refs throwing flags and the final score is what really holds players accountable. Well, the question about what does the word accountability even mean? How do you hold someone accountable in a world that you really can't anymore?
Right.
It's not like you can say, hey, I'm holding you accountable by you're going to run gassers. You're going to do, the Oklahoma drill. You're going to basically run until you puke. Those days are over. The accountability part of it is, as he's saying, if I bench you, that is the accountability, I guess.
Right, like, for example, Jalen Carter overslept. He didn't start the game against the Falcons. And it's like, okay, well, he still played later in the game.
And guess what? Most of the fans would say, I don't want him sitting out for 2 plays or a quarter because he was late. They would say, I'd rather see him because the accountability in the world has been lost.
Right. It goes back to, like, for example, in college football, one of the issues with the NIL is you have the boosters and the people saying, we're paying this kid all this money. How dare you bench him? How dare you take him off the field? We're paying for him to be on the field.
609-403-0973. Mike, I'm tired of Hurts drama. Hurts does not have a quick mind. He's a slow talker, slow thinker, slow to process. A lot of people have the same weakness. Coaches often make the mistakes of trying to fit a quarterback into their complicated system instead of utilizing the quarterback's strengths, avoiding their weaknesses. As long as Hurts has Brown, Smith, and Barkley to cover up his warts, keeping options decision-making simple for Hurts, the Eagles have a 75% chance to win. Listen, quarterback play in this league is very mediocre. However, there are too many times now where Hurts has plays to be made and he's not making them, and now his mistakes are starting to hurt the team. And as the face and the voice of this organization, Jalen Hurts has to be better. Right?
Yes.
He has to be better.
And I was talking with Chris Franklin from NGA Advanced Media, Mike, last night, and I want to ask you the question that I asked him about Hurts, which is, we know this guy is a football all the time guy, right? We know he's a very hyper focused. He's an all ball guy. But is there something to be said with the fact that maybe this guy needs to hear from somebody else?
Well, this is an interesting text message. This guy says, and he didn't leave his name, but it's a good text message from this guy. He says, the player or girl, the players like and respect Sirianni, and they don't like Hurts. Look at every comment from Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and on. They all say it without saying it. So we've heard from Jason Kelce. He's saying he loves playing for Sirianni, and Sirianni holds players accountable more than any coach he's ever played for.
Right.
So is this guy right? That the players like and respect Sirianni, and that the disconnect is with Hurts?
My response to that would be, why have we not heard that from anywhere else? Like, remember a few years ago when the Carson Wentz story came out, and people were like, what is this? And that hung over Wentz the rest of his tenure in Philadelphia. Where's the Hurts expose?
Rickety HT says, I agree that the blame is on the players, but how many times have we heard coaches say, I need to put our players in positions to succeed? Well, Rick, no coach is going to come out and say, well, this guy didn't do his job. They're just protecting their players. That's why coaches will always say, I need to put players in better positions to succeed. Right. I mean, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. However, like if I say to you, Rick, the Eagles had 15 missed tackles. So were they in position to make plays and just didn't make them? Is that on the coach or is that on the player? If I say to you, the play was there to be made. There was a player running. The player was there. All he had to do was make a tackle, and that play ends differently.
Right.
So did the coach do the job, and you just missed the tackle?
I think part of the other problem with, the coaches, the coach is also coached up, for lack of a better term, what to say by the PR department. So I'm sure that some of the answers that these guys are giving are in some ways being, for lack of a better term, fed to them. Be like, look, if you're going to get this question, this is the answer you should give. Because very rarely, as you know, Mike, we almost never get in a completely unfiltered press conference.
609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. A lot of text messages. Mike, I couldn't agree with you more. Accountability is huge from youth sports through high school, college, and the pros. It's a soft world. That's from Drew in Buna. Yeah, I mean, look, coaches want to probably discipline more. It's down to the youth levels where you're like, hey, I want to bench this guy. Unfortunately, I have a roster with 10 people on it, and if I bench you, I don't have enough players to even participate in the game.
Right.
So the accountability from the youth levels all the way up through professional sports. Now, you would say professional sports, you can bench guys because you do have bench players. And the problem is, you are benching guys who are making so much money, and then you are hurting the team. It's just a mess. I mean, in practice, too. Think back to when you played and how did you get disciplined in practice? If you were late, what did you do?
Run.
Ask your boy Klemic. His nickname was EC, extra conditioning. Why? Because he was late for practice every day. So he had to run extra conditioning after practice was over. Because he was late every day. You were late. What did you do? Extra conditioning.
Yep.
Do you think there's any extra conditioning going on in any of these NFL practices for tardiness or not paying attention during a
coaching
a film session?
Yeah.
You think Jalen Carter shows up late, so he gets penalized by not starting the game, not by getting out on the field and running till he throws up? Ask Klemic. He'll tell you.
Frankly, maybe
I was on time for practice. He was the other guy.
Frankly, maybe they should be running until they throw up.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Conditioning right
now.
The
accountability and the conditioning, all that stuff. It's something that you really can't really do in today's game anymore. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform and YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe. I've got former NFLer and current NFL free agent tight end Colin Thompson coming up on the show. Going to give us a player's perspective of all of this. Let's say, Colin Thompson, you're late for practice. What can they do to you? What can they do? What is accountability at the NFL level? That's coming up next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.
It's the Sports Bash with Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Look, they've lost 10 out of the last 13 games. So when you sit there and say, well, they're one of the best teams in the league, I don't know, being 3-10, that's kind of a stretch if you look at what's happened recently. Certainly they've got to play better defense than what they've been playing. They just gave up way too many points too quickly. They're still turning the ball over too much.
Bill Belichick said that on the Pat McAfee show about the Eagles. Look, you're 3, and I think they're 3-8 in their last 11 games. What kind of team is this? Is this just a bad team? And what is accountability in the NFL? Let's ask a guy who played in the NFL. How do you hold today's players accountable? You know, Colin Thompson, NFL free agent tight end, the Colin Thompson Show, Sirius XM NFL Radio, joins me right now on the Sports Bash to give us a player's perspective on that very topic, Colin Thompson. A lot of word accountability getting thrown around about this team the last couple of days. How do you hold an NFL player accountable in today's game? I can't say, Colin Thompson, you were late for practice today or you weren't paying attention in the film. You're running gassers. That don't happen anymore, does it?
Cash. They hit your wallet. If you're late, if you miss a meeting, it's about, I think it's like $5,000. If you miss the meeting, the team meeting could be 5 minutes. I've seen guys do this where you have a 5-minute team meeting, miss that. And then you have like a 5-minute offensive quick unit meeting before going to individual. And then you miss that. So that's like a $10,000 pocketbook hit. And everyone's like, oh, that's nothing to a millionaire. No, it's not, because that's your weekly pay, right? You get paid weekly. So if you make $20,000 that week, that's half your pay for that week's gone. You know, if you look at it that way. So they hit your pocketbook. You also get fined, Mike, for accountability if you're overweight or underweight. So if you have your goal weight, for me, it was 253, 255, right? Whatever that was when I played, 250. So you have like 2 pounds plus or minus. So if I weighed in at 250, for every pound, it's like $500, right? So there's accountability in that. It's money. And also, it's also what's your contract look like, to the extent of like, are you going to lose your job? Like, you're going to get cut if you're not playing well. Like, I'll never forget this. We played the Eagles. I didn't play well. And Coach Rule came up to me at a walkthrough the next day and said, if you suck, I will cut you. And he's right. You know, I wasn't playing well. And that's how it goes. Now, if you're a guaranteed money guy, your best players need to be playing the best. But, Mike, it's not about the accountability of the players of this organization right now. Let's hold everyone's feet to the fire. Culturally, there's a problem. It's a culture problem. And you would never say that about the Eagles. Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Jalen Hurts is a grinder, Lane Johnson. There's a culture issue, Mike. Since they've lost that Super Bowl by 3 to the Chiefs, man, it has not been the same since Gannon walked out that door and everybody thought was a goof. I think he's a pretty good football coach. And then Steichen walked out that door, which everybody has a lot of respect for. It's not been the same. Now, that doesn't mean it's the coordinator's fault, because I'm a Desai fan. Desai and Vic Fangio, they're the same structure. But this is an owner, this is a GM, this is the head coach, this is a quarterback. This is a group that's really well compensated. This is a group that's really well respected, that has not performed in over a year. Think about those games last year, Mike, when I was on your show. It was like, wow, they're just learning to win close games. Like, no, the Chiefs dropped a wide open touchdown last year. If anybody remembers that, they should have won. I think it was Valdez-Scantling maybe, or Hardman, one of those guys. The Buffalo game probably should have been all right. So I digress, Mike, but I think it's a culture issue top down, because now it's just oozing out of that place. Did you feel any juice against the Bucs? It's like, no.
Well, today, Fangio, for instance, he said it was surprising that they came out with all these short, quick passes. You know, he said, they came out throwing real fast, real quick, and we weren't tight enough. And you're saying, yeah, we kept telling them to move up, but they weren't really doing it. Like, that's where you're like, I can't imagine Vic Fangio not being able to get his message across to his defense.
And those defensive backs are like dudes too now. This isn't like just like run-of-the-mill DBs. It's like Quinn. What they were doing, they were taking free access. What's free access mean? If your corner's like the first play of the game, they did it. If your corner's like 8 yards off, Mike Evans just run a 5-yard route, hit him, boom, dot. Then you're 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4 on the little Omaha, the quick out route, the 5-yard out. So that's what you see with Mike and Brady and all them take it. For the number one receivers in the league, how do we get them the ball? if there's free access, again, the guy's 8 to 10 yards off, we're just going to take it. If it's press, we're just going to hand the ball off. Like if there's a run, we're going to run it. But if I look out there and I'm a quarterback and I see this, you see it all the time on the goal line with the fade routes, right? Press man to man. So, you know what, Mike? You know what I was thinking about? Go to Tampa, you lose in the playoffs pretty bad. You know, you'd probably change the process of how you go about your weeks of practice compared to last year, I would assume, right? There was practice hard, not hard, whatever. You can't practice hard in the NFL in season. You can't. Look at the Ravens. They do it. How do they last in the playoffs? I'm for the Ravens' point, if I'm them, man, I'm just, it's a leap of faith. Everyone, I need you fresh and healthy. We're going to get to the games and and the Ravens are a great organization. The Patriots are a great organization. They're the ones that practice hard. It's like, can we afford to injure guys, but can we afford not to be sharp? I digress. Go back to the Eagles. Why didn't they go to Tampa on Monday and practice down there and get ready for the Heat? I get it. East Coast all the time. But how much is a win worth? Especially in the NFC. How much is a win worth, Mike? And to me, it's priceless. Because look at Washington. I get it. West Coast, go out to Arizona. Right? The West Coast teams, they come to the East Coast, they stay at the Greenbrier, they stay in Charlotte. Why don't you go down to Tampa, practice at USF?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you take a look at, they mentioned it many times during the game, how hot it was. I thought Brady brought up a good point of, hey, when you're in the Northeast, later on in the season, you have the home field advantage. When you're down here, early in the season, we have the home field advantage. And, it looked like a lot of that game. And now, it didn't help that the Eagles defense was on the field all day long. And I'll ask you, Colin, you were a guy that was a reserve player in the NFL. When you look at the Eagles offense, no A.J. Brown, no Devontae Smith, no Lane Johnson, do you enter that game and say, they're going to have a tough day at the office trying to get points?
I look around the league, Mike. Look how many injuries there are. And look how teams are still finding a way to have success. I mean, the Rams have like a skeleton roster right now. And some they came back against the Niners last week and won. You're like, how are they winning? That's coach and quarterback. And then when you look at the Chiefs, I mean, they're on their third, fourth running back? Guy was on the street, wasn't even at training camp, I think, Kareem Hunt. So, the good ones find a way. Rashid Rice goes down. They still come back and win. To me, it's like, I get it. You need the Jimmies and Joes, but when the Jimmies and Joes aren't healthy, man, you got to dial it up for you to have success. I don't know, Mike. At the end of the day, I think there's the Eagles organization I have a ton of respect for. I do. I grew up there. I played against them. I lost to them. I know. I know a lot of people in that building. Respect. But there's something in the water right now. You can't put your hands on it.
What?
No one. You can't. I don't think anybody can.
No, and the answer that I think it stands out to everybody is when Hurts is asked basically, hey, do you and Sirianni talk about your identity and the accountability? He says, we have our moments. What is your reaction as a guy who's been in locker rooms to see the starting quarterback kind of almost dismiss the question as we have our moments?
Man, there's smoke, there's fire. And there's just been smoke. There's just been, I was preparing for your show today, preparing for my show. I'm watching the tape yesterday, Mike. I got a guy down here in Annapolis who's a Philly guy who's in the gym with me, who's always hounding me. And I'm just like, are you excited? Are they an exciting football team? Are they the team that we watched when they won when they were in the Super Bowl and almost beat the Chiefs? Should have beat the Chiefs? And they have the pass rush and they have the O-line and there's this identity of F you, man. Where is that? Where is that? The only time you see that is with the tush push, and you hope Saquon blows one out the water. But the first play of the game, Hurts is really. I'm a Hurts fan. He missed that throw. Saquon was open for a touchdown. You're just it's just at the end of the day, Mike. I think that it's everybody. You could point to every single thing. You pay Huff. I think was a great player in the Jet scheme, but he's not a stand-up outside linebacker who sets the edge. That's Hassan Reddick. He walked out the door. They let him walk out. He was perfect for this defense. That's why they brought him in to begin with, to play in that defense after the Super Bowl run. Okay, and then Sweat, he's getting older and he's had injury problems. He's not the same guy. So, that is huge. Your big money guys got to play your best. And if they're not playing their best, your coach, Sean McVay, Andy Reid, go down the list. The guys in New England you couldn't even name it wide out for periods of time. So that's where I'm at, Mike. I know you keep going back to it, man. Where's the excitement? Where's the juice? Where's the culture in Philly right now? I don't feel it.
Yeah.
I do feel it. It's not positive.
Well, and listen, I go back to, you talk about it doesn't feel right. I got to imagine Sirianni's obviously getting a lot of heat, and he's here, and everybody says, well, what are you doing? What do you do? I don't know. Did when you were in Carolina, did Rule call plays?
No, he did not.
Right. He was a CEO head coach, right? So the point is, like, a lot of people say, what does Sirianni do? Just because you don't call the plays doesn't mean you're not doing anything. So what does a guy who's not Sean McVay, a head coach / play caller, what are they doing on game day to kind of justify to people? Because they ask all the time, well, what do you do?
It's a great question. And another organization, Mike, they may have a lot more involvement. Coach Rule was involved in personnel. Coach Rule was involved in everything, like situational football. Coach Rule was unbelievable at, and that's what Sirianni could be doing. It's like, okay, guys, here's the 3 examples of 2-minute drills that happened. What can we learn from those 3 examples that happened last week in the NFL? Guys, here's a tape of every special teams blunder last week. The Saints opening play of their punt return, fumbled it in the end zone. That's why they lost the game, really. So, that's what a lot of coaches do, are putting tapes together to show how other teams are beating themselves. Because honestly, this league is just full of teams that are beating themselves, not even really winning games. Mm-hmm. So that's their role, is like personnel, scheduling, operational stuff, talking to media. It's a lot. Yeah. But I'll say this. I know Coach Sirianni's, I would assume he's not involved in personnel because that's how he's shown.
Right.
So what's then okay, now what? Right? Coach Rule had a big role in person, and I thought he did a great job with in Carolina. We had some good players there. So at the end of the day, I don't know, man. To me, Mike, there needs to be a culture shift. I would have went down on Monday to Tampa and said, bring your families. Here's the hotel. You can get Airbnbs. We're going to do a normal week. We need to restart because there's a cultural issue here in the building. I do say this too, Mike, defensively. I think there's an adjustment to the defense a little bit, and they'll be fine as the season goes along. They got some good players on there. I think that's going to be a mainstay for them.
I want to play this bite from Jason Kelce. He said this on the New Heights podcast regarding Nick Sirianni and why he felt that Sirianni is one of the best head coaches he's ever been around. This is Jason Kelce. Take a listen, Colin Thompson. Hold on. I had it queued up for you here. Let me get it queued up.
Everything's excellent.
There we go. Yep.
Nick, and I really mean this, is one of the best coaches I've been around, and talking about coaching situational ball, really understanding what to do in the right moment, motivating guys. We coach things up in team meetings and hold people accountable better than pretty much any other coach I've been around.
Are you surprised to hear the 3 things he said? Holding people accountable better than any coach I've ever been around, which includes Doug Peterson and Andy Reid, by the way. Situational and motivating. So when I hear that from Jason Kelce, am I supposed to suggest that Nick Sirianni is the problem here?
This is a culture issue, top down, Mike. I think it's
Are you surprised that bite? Are you surprised to hear that bite?
I'm just. It's great to hear. I respect Jason. And when Jason isn't to speak, he's a pretty sharp guy.
That was on, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, that was on New Heights. That was on New Heights. So he's on his podcast. He's not he's not answering a question from a media member. He's talking freely.
He's not on ESPN where they're paying him X, I think.
Right, well, he's not taking a question from a reporter and answering it in a blowbag way. He's speaking freely on his own podcast.
Just a couple things. It makes, if an Eagle fan, it would make me happy to hear that. That's great. And I just described Coach Rule doing the same thing. Now, everyone's like, well, Coach Rule lost, whatever. There's a reason why you lose games outside of being a coach. My point is this. It's either on, the whole thing needs to be at a reboot. Not meaning coaches fired and all that. I mean, we got to mix something up. We got to mix something up because it's not looking pretty. And you don't have the same juice and more. It's just not there. It's like the Eagles, man. They're a great football team, but they're not playing great. So like Coach Belichick said, are they legit? You got to be legit. You got to win games to be legit. That's Tampa taking it to them now, twice in 5 games. So at the end of the day, Mike, it was great to hear from Jason to him say that. But at the end of the day, the players got to step up and be like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. And I thought Carter did that against New Orleans. They did some on film, he did some big things against the Bucs too, but they were 4 hands on him at all times.
Yeah.
I mean, he stands out on the D-line, Mike, when you watch the film. Like, he looks like a bear. Like,
and that was a topic today in the press conference, with Fangio. He was asked about Jalen Carr is on pace for 850 snaps. That's 300 more than last year. Does he think that's sustainable?
What did he say?
He said, I don't know. It's an individual thing. I'm used to in a lot of places where defensive linemen can play that much. To me, it's an individual thing. It's a nice shot at the player saying, if you get your ass in shape, you can play that much.
Yeah, well, it's too late. You can't get in shape in season. You can play well. He'll be fine. The guy's a freak. He's a great player. Mike, at the end of the day, as a player, you got to take responsibility. You got to point the thumb. If everybody in your organization points the thumb, not the finger, you'll have a lot of success.
Okay, let me ask you. You're an offensive player.
Yeah.
You hear 15 missed tackles. What's that tell you?
It means we're tired. Not that we don't practice tackling or that they're not good players. Like, they got good players on every level of that defense. That's why they impressed me, honestly. Like, that once they get it together, that defense is going to run the team. Because offensively right now, at times it's the most talented group in the league probably. But it's not clicking. It is, but they
got some injury issues for sure. But I definitely think the quarterback.
The Rams.
But
the Rams
I'm saying,
like
I agree with you. But I'm saying I think they have some injury issues, which elevates the quarterback. The quarterback to me is not an elevator. He's elevated by what's around him. So you're going to struggle if your quarterback can't be Matthew Stafford and pull guys up to him. He lowers to he's afraid to throw the ball to Dotson, and he's afraid to throw the ball to Campbell. You can see it in his face. You don't trust those guys.
They need to get under center, like I said in the offseason, Mike. And you're seeing some of it. They're starting to get under center now and throw some screens. I'm getting under center. I'm running the football, and I'm play action pass. Look at the Vikings. Sam Darnold's like the best QB in the league this year. Derek Carr at times looked like the best quarterback on the planet.
You've been calling the Darnold thing for a couple of years and looking like an idiot.
Right? And everyone's like, this guy's 610. No. So my point is, like, I just saw it with my own 2 eyes. The bottom line is just run the ball, play action. Purdy, Darnold, Carr, it works. The only teams it doesn't work for is Kansas City because they got the best player on the planet. So they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Cincinnati doesn't do it because they have Joe Burrow. How's that working out? So at the end of the day, it's like, that's what you got to do to win football games in this league. Run the ball, stop the run. The trend has shifted completely back to it.
Yep.
And teams are running the hell out of the football.
All right. He is Colin Thompson, the Colin Thompson Show, Sirius XM NFL Radio. Not for long. You can check him out on his podcast, his YouTube channel, and all that good jazz. And right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. This has been a really good conversation. If we had more time, we'd be continuing good conversation because I have a lot of more questions. But I have not a lot more time.
Culture, Mike, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is. I don't think anybody can put their finger on it, and I think that's what kind of rubs people the wrong way. There's not one person to blame. I think the whole thing.
Hey, I'll tell you what, your former place, a quick change from Young to what's his name? Dalton has changed the feeling in that locker room pretty quickly. I know they didn't win last week, but they look like a competent NFL team all of a sudden.
They got good players in there. They pay a lot of money to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The owner's a little weird. Mike. The owner's a little weird down there. I won't make you comment on that one.
Have a great day, Mike. Thank you.
All right, man. See ya. Colin Thompson, former Carolina Panther, and of course here on the Sports Bash Live. We'll wrap up the hour. John McMullen at 3:00. We'll get his thoughts on today's Vic Fangio comments. That's coming up.
You're listening to the Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
And it just keeps getting better.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
All right, 2:53. Before we get to the next hour, last night, Pete Rose, 83 years old, passed away. What a weird story. He was actually at a card show Sunday and passed away Sunday night. Bizarre story. We all know the story of Pete Rose. Banned from baseball, on the ineligible list for the Hall of Fame. I have maintained for years that Pete Rose, the steroid guys, all of them belong in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is and always has been a museum. A museum's purpose is to tell the story of your event and or your game. The Hall of Fame to me is a fraud without these stories. Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? look, he's a terrible human being, was an awful guy, had a terrible circumstances of what he lived in terms of denial, but he played your game. And your game's story is incomplete without telling the story of Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame. 83 years old, Pete Rose passed away on the same day as Dikembe Mutombo. By the way, a great human being, a great person who helped get the Sixers to the NBA Finals. And Dikembe Mutombo was 58 years old. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Red October starts this Saturday on 97.3 ESPN.
Jersey. This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Bad sign, but not just for them getting blown out, for what the remarks made by Hurts after the game. That's the truly bad sign. That, to me, just shows he has no respect for Nick Sirianni. I mean, when you talk about you are the voice of the Philadelphia Eagles. That's the bottom line. Kelsey's gone. Fletcher got core four, I think is what they called him, with all the leaders they had before Hurts got there. But he now is the voice of the Eagles. And when the quarterback and head coach aren't on the same page, that's a bad sign for your football team.
That's Jeff Saturday, who heard the comments after the game from Jalen Hurts. And that was because Saturday has been a guy who's kind of backed Sirianni a lot here. Now, remember, Jeff Saturday coached in the NFL briefly, so he understands what the coach has to go through. So he has been a Sirianni kind of defender here. But he said, I can't defend hearing the comments from Jalen Hurts. And John McMullen joins us now from Birds 365 and, of course, Sports Illustrated. He joins me on a Tuesday edition of the Sports Bash as the Eagles turn on a bye week. John McMullen, what's up, buddy?
Hey, how are you, Mike?
I'm always
another interesting one. I love the clips, man. I love the clips.
Well, this is Saturday basically saying, hey, I tried to defend him, but hearing what Jalen Hurts said the other day, there's got to be something there. We just had Colin Thompson on last hour. He kind of said, too, he thinks there's got to be something happening there between these two. Do you see a disconnect between the two most important pieces, the head coach and the quarterback?
Yeah, well, look, things aren't going well when things aren't going well. I mean, things tend to get a little testy, a little bit, maybe that's not the right word, but, you know, people start getting a little bit on edge. And I think you're at that point with the Eagles because of, you know, some of the things we talked about last year, the expectations, maybe a little bit overblown by a lot of people, especially early in the season when you're trying to learn under two new coordinators. It's not a surprise to me that they're 2-2 at the bye. But it was pretty ugly how they got there. But interestingly, they probably wouldn't be 2-2 if some key guys didn't get hurt. So in a lot of ways, you could say they're a little bit better, at least when healthy, than I expected. So it's kind of the way you frame it. But as far as the coach and the quarterback, look, this has been pretty consistent. And it happened again today with Kellen Moore. This organization bends over backward to protect Jalen Hurts, and he does not do the same for the head coach. Take that however you want it, but that's the reality. And he's got a tough time. You know, the old adage of quarterbacks, this is every quarterback. When things are successful, it's we. When things are not, it's me. Jalen Hurts evidently has a problem with the second part of that.
Yeah, somebody brought up an interesting point. I hadn't really thought of it, but there was a text message that came in from a listener actually earlier that said the players like and respect Sirianni. It's Hurts they don't like. Do we think that there's a disconnect between Hurts and the players?
I don't want to go that far. I do think people jump down they go to these extremes. very early in the process. The players do, for the most part, do have a lot of respect for Nick Sirianni. The quarterback is a little bit. We went through this with Carson Wentz, and it was framed as, well, Jalen engages with everybody, and Carson didn't. That was the old.
John, you remember this when Hurts first came out. No one ever said, "What a great passer! What a great accuracy!" It was, this guy was a leader. That was the only thing anybody could ever conjure up to say about the guy in the first couple years.
So I mean, he's very guarded. He's got he doesn't have a typical quarterback personality, and I think that throws people off. Same thing happened with Carson Wentz, different personality, but he didn't have the typical quarterback personality, and it threw people off. And I think the same thing is happening with Jalen Hurts. I don't think his teammates have a big problem with Jalen Hurts by and large. Now, if you want to bring it down to, 70 guys, nobody's going to get along with everybody. I'm sure somebody in that building doesn't like him, and I'm sure he doesn't like somebody in that building.
Yeah.
But to me, it's very concentrated. And Jalen doesn't seem to find the need to pay any lip service to what you're expected to pay lip service to, if that makes sense. So he's got no time for the everybody's great, I'm going to defend the offensive coordinator, the head coach, and he probably should, especially in a town like this. But I just think that's his personality.
Well, especially when they have to keep covering for you and the mistakes you're making.
Well, exactly. I mean, exactly.
Just for the listeners out there, real quick, for the listeners, the question that was asked was, as you enter the bye and you want to find an identity, do you two, Hurts and Sirianni, talk about maybe what you want the message to be to the team, or how you kind of want to handle things as you guys go into the second part of the year? And Hurts says, we have our moments. It almost is like the answer to the question.
There's nothing. It's very short because he doesn't want to answer. I know Jalen well enough to know he didn't want to answer. So when he does it, he's very short when he doesn't want to answer a question.
Right. Now, and on the flip side, you get a guy like today, Fangio. He's very short, and people like that.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, that's his way of shutting down the questioning.
Okay.
Now, if you look at just the words, though, they're not bad. There's nothing bad.
There's a much better way to answer that question, though.
No, yeah, there is. and that's why I said, unfortunately, he doesn't want to deal with certain parts of his job. And unfortunately, Nick Sirianni doesn't want to meet with the media 5 times a week, but it's part of his job.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to deal with it. And that's part of his job, and he's got to deal with it. And there's a better way to deal with it. I agree with you 100% there. But this, and by the way, whatever this team is, 3-8, I think now, during this stretch, and he's turned it over more times than any other team besides Tennessee this year. If you go back to last year, the turnover ratio is just ridiculous in a negative fashion. When you're going through this type of stretch, people want to see accountability, and this goes back to the Seattle game last year. That's not a strength of his.
Is it a strength? Is it a strength of the head coach?
Oh, the head coach protects everybody. The head coach made himself look like a fool to protect A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts.
Well, I'm talking about, is it a strength of the head coach, the account? Because today I was a little floored by some of Fangio's comments saying, we didn't think they were going to come out and throw the ball short and quick on us.
Well, Vic's just honest. So, nobody's used to honesty. And Vic's just honest. So you're always, typically as a reporter at these things, you're always trying to figure out the proper wording to get them to say something. With Vic, you don't have to worry about it. You just ask him the question. And he just answers the question.
Yeah. Well, and you asked a question about the adjustment because he said we told our corners to play closer up, and they didn't do it. I mean, I said, I feel like I'm coaching a 13-year-old third baseman, and I want him to play on the grass, and 2 pitches later, he's right back to where he started. I said, get back on the grass. Like, what are you doing? I said, the difference is my third baseman doesn't make $20 million. Like, it's perplexing to me that he's saying we tried to get the corners to press, and they never did.
Well, yeah, I don't know about press, but, you know.
Well, you know what I mean. Like,
they play a lot of zone with man principles, which is,
so you were in the room, just so I'm reading the transcript that I can. It seemed that he was insinuating that he did try to tell the corners to come up closer, and they didn't do it.
Did.
Not like
he definitely
now.
Did.
You got not Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold last night. He was all sides almost. He was so up on the receivers.
Yeah.
Now he got called for 5 penalties.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a give and take. But in that particular game, you were getting killed early with the quick passing game, and I do think, you know. You and I discuss this all the time. I think there's way too many people that think the coaches have joysticks and that they can fix anything in a moment. And, you know, all you can do is say, you know, he's upstairs and he relays it downstairs and say, hey, they're killing us with the quick passing game. We got to get tighter. And they don't get tighter. And, you know, for whatever reason, and then you got to start, you know, as he phrased it, coaching it better, which is, you know, basically reaming people out to do what they're supposed to do. But yeah, it was a poor performance. And, you know, Vic's not going to hide from that. At least there's now, if you listen to Kellen Moore's, press conference after, I mean, he didn't say a damn thing, you know, and the difference.
Well, Kellen's a little bit more all shucksy, you know, a little bit more.
Yeah,
you know.
well, he's very political, and he's not going to, and he's, you know, bending over backwards, jumping on his sword for Jalen Hurts. Everybody in this organization protects Jalen Hurts like he's a newborn baby, and he doesn't return it. And
yes, perplexing.
It seems to be like the public sentiment, because I used to get killed for criticizing Jalen Hurts for anything. I mean, people thought it was unfair to criticize him for anything, and it's not unfair to criticize. Nobody's perfect. Everybody needs to improve on certain things. And now it seems to be turning rather rapidly. So Jalen and his team might want to get together and start taking some accountability for this stuff.
John McMullen,
and start appreciating the people protecting him, by the way.
I would agree with that. That's the thing is the coach is out there and he's kind of cleaning up the mess for you. And then you get asked a question like that where you say, yeah, coach and I, we're on the same page. Because I go back to, and I think you and I talked about this in the offseason, I can't imagine a situation where Lurie and Roseman went to Sirianni and said, hey, do you and Hurts have problems? Now, even if Sirianni, who doesn't want to get fired, says, nah, we're fine. Okay, let me ask Jalen. Jalen, do you have any problem playing for Coach Sirianni? And if Jalen pauses or has any trepidation at all, you would think the decision would be made that, hey, if you can't play for this guy, we have to move on. So this would have been squashed, potentially, you would think, in the offseason. Because if not, then you got to go above and say, if you had any inclination that these two guys are not on the same page, you got to do something.
Well, and I think what you played, I mean, Jeff Saturday was a coach for a very short period of time in a weird situation, but at least he's coached before, so he understands, you know, sort of the dynamic of the whole thing, especially the dynamic of a bad situation. So that holds a little bit more weight than, you know, Chris Canty, who seems to be ripping, you know, Nick Sirianni at every corner, but I do think, you know, that 3 words. What were the words again? 3 words? I mean, people are taking a lot of leaps on 3 words for a guy who's very
we have
close.
Our moments.
Yeah, very close and guarded. It's like, have they ever listened to him before? You know, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to say it's good, but the bad parts are about, like, why, like, you and I talked about the turnover, the strip sack. Like, that's Jalen's fault. And Nick's protecting him. Like, that's not good. Yeah, it is. That one's on the quarterback. Week one, if you want to go back to Cam Jurgens snapping the ball early, is that on the quarterback? Probably not. The Devontae Smith interception in the end zone when he ran the bad route, is that on the quarterback? Probably not. The interception in the end zone in Green Bay, that's the quarterback. The strip sack, that's the quarterback.
Yeah.
But he's still protecting them.
You and I have talked long enough over the years, and you've covered this league a lot longer than I have to know there has to be a definitive only one guy is at fault generally. It can't be multiples.
Well, yeah. And the case where, the Cam Jurgens, Jalen Hurts can pick him up. You saw a bad snap yesterday. Geno Smith managed to corral it. Now, they didn't score, but whatever. You can always pick up. I always said, Saquon Barkley dropping the ball. The defense could have picked up Saquon Barkley. And even after the defense faltered, the offense had time to pick them up.
Yeah.
So there's always more than, could Saquon have done a better job in pass protection against Levante David? Yeah, he could have done a better job. But if you are, what the Eagles do is they go through film and there's a mistake. They put the player's number on the film, up on the, Jason Kelsey's talked about this and how much accountability they have. And they call out the player. And I guarantee you in the film room, the player called out was Jalen Hurts. But in public, Nick Sirianni's protecting him. So when he doesn't offer the same sort of, I don't want to call it protection because he's not the head coach, but when he doesn't reciprocate that at all, I think people can go in a negative direction, and many have. And I'm not saying they can't, but it's strange. I will say that. It is strange.
All right, John McMullen's with it. You asked a question today that I brought up last hour before I knew you asked this question. So you and I seemingly are on the same wavelength a lot here, John. We've been doing this together for a while. So you said if it's a better tackling day, does that help with the coverage problem? So this goes back to, he says, I need to do a better job coaching, put them in better positions. But were they in position? So in other words, if they don't miss 15 tackles, how different is that game?
Oh, very different. And, that's part of the problem, I think, as a whole. I mean, I'm not a big fan of this scheme. It's weird because I do think Vic Fangio is a very good defensive coordinator. I just think the league has caught up to the scheme. And I've said that for when Jonathan Gannon was here. But never mind. And they've gone through Sean Desai. Now they're same scheme. I think the league has caught up to it a little bit, at least the smarter quarterbacks and the ones that know how to decipher things pretty quickly post-snap. They've caught up to it. And I think in a lot of ways you can lean on that and say, oh, well, if we just tackle better, there's nothing wrong. I wouldn't go that far. But if they had a decent tackling day, yeah, I think it looks much better from a defensive standpoint. I mean, it's rare that you see a tackling day that poor. And I expect it to be the worst tackling day of the year for the Eagles. And if they have a worse one like that, that's even deeper trouble. But, how do you improve tackling in this era? I checked the PFF numbers, and I know people, they might like True Media. Use whatever you want. Use PFF, use Next Gen Stats. They all had different numbers for the
Vic had 15, right?
Yeah, the Eagles had 15. So Next Gen Stats, I think, had 16. True Media was actually lower. They only had 12. I forget what PFF had. But
double-digit missed tackles in a game. 10, 11, 12. And once you're at 10, you're in.
So the point is, it doesn't matter where you look, including and the only one that matters is the Eagles, and they themselves in-house said 15. That's awful. And, they practice tackling every day. But here's where some of these guys, and a lot of these guys have played pro football, and I get it. And I Seth is one locally for a good friend of mine. Look, you can't do what they did. is collectively bargained out of the game. So it's kind of irrelevant when you hear, well, you got to do this, you got to do this. Nobody in the end, it's not like the Eagles are by themselves. You know, tackling has been legislated to the point that very few teams have even any live periods in training camp. You can do a few. The Eagles do a few. They generally do it with third teamers. Even less take it to the ground. They just do thuds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no two-a-days. There's no, live periods where you're tackling guys to the ground. It doesn't exist anymore. So it's a waste of time talking about it. And it's like, if you could point to 3, 4, even 10 other teams that no other team does it either.
So, we've talking earlier, about, I know Mike Lombardi has gone on about he doesn't think this team is conditioned well enough, that they're just not a well-conditioned team, holding account. I said, you can't hold guys accountable. Colin Thompson, I said, how do they get held accountable if you're late or you are, you're not giving an effort in practice? He said, your pocketbook, you get fined. There's no more, hey, you're running after practice and you're running gassers or you're doing Oklahoma. You know what I'm saying? Like, there is no more of that. The Eagles, on the first day of practice, the Eagles had like 3 false starts. And Jordan Mailata and got together and made the rest of the offensive linemen run gassers to be, as punishment. But yeah, there's no old school, like, Andy Reid would make people, in the blocking sled in front of the media. There's none of that anymore. Yeah.
And
frustrating.
And I just think people think there is in other cities, and there aren't. So that's the point I'm trying to make. You can talk about it. I wish it would go back to the old days as well, but it's not. So to me, it's irrelevant to talk about it. It's like. And by the way, I did check the tackling numbers. There are 9 worse teams than the Eagles at tackling this season, early through 4 games. And you see how bad they are.
Yeah.
There's 9 teams worse.
The tackling in this league is horrendous every week, everywhere, every place you go. I do think, and there's so much more this week. I mean, that we got into, it's a bye week, but there's a lot. Sidney Brown, what's his role when he comes back? Cooper DeJean, he got mentioned today that, he might be more ready to go. Are they going to replace Avonte Maddox? So let's kind of hit on that a little bit. Where does Sidney Brown even fit in on this team?
Yeah, he's going to be, when he does, they're going to start his practice window after the bye here. And he's been raring to go behind the scenes anyway. It's one of those things where he got hurt in January. It's a 9-month injury. So, they wanted to play it safe and make sure he was healed. He felt he could play for week 1, but they weren't going to push it. And he'll start on special teams and he'll be a pretty important member there. And it gives them better depth. You saw what happened when Reed Blankenship had to tap out to the Heat.
That's another bizarre story, by the way. The guy was sick and the coach didn't know it.
Well, I'll tell you what, if there's one guy I would have predicted would not tap out to the Heat, it would be Reed Blankenship. The guy doesn't even sweat. He doesn't even sweat typically. But these things happen. That's another thing. It's like, when you go to Green Bay in January, it's an advantage for Green Bay.
Yeah, Brady brought this up in the broadcast.
Yeah, and when you go to Tampa or Miami in September and you hit one of those days, guess what? It's an advantage for them.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Mike, people get it with the cold weather, but they don't get it with the hot weather. It's like they're used to it.
Now, Colin insinuated that the Eagles should have gone down to practice earlier in the week down there if you knew it was going to be that hot.
Well, they couldn't, because of the hurricane. So, I love Colin, but, there were travel issues all over the place. There was concern early that Helene would actually hit in the Tampa area. They got a little bit salvage. It went up to the Big Bend area of Florida for people that know Florida. But so there were issues from that standpoint. They were even talking about potentially moving the game if need be, if there was a direct hit on the Bay Area. So I think that complicated things, number one. Not that they would have done it. I don't think they would have done it. And then I don't think it was the long-term forecast because of the way the hurricane went. And then you had this, because it was a hot day, but the humidity was the issue. I think it topped out at like 94, but the on-field temperature was 110 because of the humidity. And that's not something that's necessarily predictable, 7 or 10 days out, even if you don't have a hurricane.
There's another couple crazy stories here. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Darius Slay, is that a problem?
No. No. Other than, well, I think I think they should all stay away from social media, but they're not. I mean, it's a different generation. Slay's got his podcast. Mike has got his podcast. They're on there. CJ's now doing his thing on Twitch or whatever. Yep. And, you've seen it. AJ's gotten in problems. These guys get a lot of what when they don't play well and they get attacked and for the so
you got Trey Thomas chiming in too, saying, I can't imagine Bobby Taylor, Troy Vincent, Lito Shepherd, Sheldon Brown going on DeMarcus Ware's MySpace live show to discuss Brian Dawkins' performance.
Well, exactly. But, the standpoint of those things didn't exist back then. With all due respect to Trey, they didn't exist. Now you have a whole generation. And by the way, I think, number one, I think the Eagles should tell these guys and do as much about, look, leave the social media alone. Don't go near it. No good is going to come of it. But you can't do that. You can't say, Slay, you can't do a podcast. And this generation of people is obsessed with social media, and they want to take their message directly to the people. A lot of people like that because they don't like us, the media, and so they get it unfiltered. Well, welcome to Unfiltered.
Yeah.
And by the way, but Slay, specifically, because I got a lot of, he shouldn't be a captain, he shouldn't be this. First of all, his teammates voted him a captain. And second of all, I always go back, Mike, when Julius Erving strangled Larry Bird on the cover of Sports Illustrated, true rivalries of sports, and then it became in the NBA, Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas kissing at center court in the NBA Finals. It's a different era. And Slay, if you follow him on social media, is a very uplifting person. He compliments everybody. He stresses the positive, teammates and opponents, and Eagles fans don't like that. But that's who he is.
Yeah. Well, that and man, there's so many more things. I mean, Devin White, he had an interesting day on Sunday. What's his future here? We got a lot to talk about during the bye week. We'll get into that tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, 8:20. You can check me out on Birds 365 with John on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. I'll be there talking some Eagles with those guys, and we'll be back here tomorrow with more as the Birds turn. John McMullen is your host. All right, John.
Yeah, I would recommend get off social media. I'd recommend that for everybody, by the way.
That'd be great. I like it. All right, buddy.
All right, see you, Mike.
There's John. All right, John McMullen's brought to you by Boardwalk Honda. Shop their lineup of new pre-owned and certified pre-owned Hondas online, boardwalkhonda.com. Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, we didn't even get into the Devin White stuff, the C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Slay stuff, but I thought John brought up a lot of interesting points that we can continue on. Your text messages continue to come in, 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. We've got Who's Hot, Who's Cold on the way.
Kia.
You're listening to the Sport.
With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows the resourceful individual to earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with the handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Get the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth for just $5 a month. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
With Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe. Who's in? Who's out? Who's hot? Who's cold? Brought to you by Ace Hardware Home Services, heating, cooling, and plumbing. The helpful team is now making house calls in South Jersey. Visit AceHardwareHomeservices.com to book today. Who's hot? Who's cold? These are my hot teams this week. The 14 NFL playoff teams after 4 weeks of NFL football. You ready for this one? This one's tough, man. I don't really know. This is just throwing darts, not fish in a barrel by any stretch of the imagination. Who's hot? Who's cold in the AFC East? I'm going with the Bills.
I mean, they are arguably the best team right now in the AFC.
Yeah, the Jets have been disappointing. I think the Jets can regroup and rebound, but I don't know that their ceiling is higher than I thought it was at the beginning of the year.
Josh Allen is playing out of his mind right now. The guy's got a cape on. It's incredible.
Yep, they're better than I thought they were, although the league isn't as good as I thought it was. That could be part of the problem there. They got boat raced on Monday night by this team, the North champions, Baltimore. Baltimore seemingly has figured some things out. They've gotten some things right. I should have stuck with them. I liked them at the beginning of the year. I bounced off of them a couple times. I'm going back to Baltimore.
The fact they're using Derrick Henry more is probably the best sign of all because they're finally using the guy, Mike, that listen, you bring in Derrick Henry to help Lamar Jackson, not to just to be a hey, we have this guy, it's like, don't pay attention to what the puppeteer's doing kind of thing. No, you actually use the guy. You let him go out there and run.
I like what they've done here the last couple of weeks with him, and I think they're only going to get better and better. All right, in the South, I'm going Houston, and I really haven't wavered off that, although they haven't been as good as I thought they would be.
I think that the situation where a lot of people saw what C.J. Stroud did last year, and now their offense coordinator who, remember, he was getting all kinds of head coaching interviews, Bobby Slovic. He and Stroud need to sit down and figure out, okay, people are starting to see what we did last year. How can we adjust?
In the West, I'm going Kansas City. Not much there.
No, that's pretty simple.
Wild cards. This is tough.
It is.
So who's hot this week? Who are my wild card teams this week? These things are going to change, it seems like, almost every week. Probably. You kind of get a feel for a team, and then the next week they change because they change so quickly. I'm going Pittsburgh because of their defense.
I agree.
I'm sticking with the Jets.
Me too.
And I got the Chargers.
Wow, we agreed on all three of those. I like the fact that the Chargers are in every single game this year.
Yeah, their defense and Pittsburgh's defense, both very good. I like the Chargers persevering through some injuries, even though they lost this week against the Chiefs. They battled. I think they get healthy, and their defense carries them. Some of the cold teams that I'm kind of on the outsides with, I think Miami's just cooked. Their quarterback situation is so bad.
Mike McDaniel, not Josh McDaniel. Mike McDaniel looks like completely lost during that game last night. Like he just had no answers at all.
Yeah, they got, the quarterback situation's a mess for them. Cleveland, don't like the vibe there at all. Cincinnati, don't like the vibe there at all. Indianapolis, I thought about them this week. I kind of think that if they can get Flacco to play quarterback, are they going to stick with him or are they going to go back to Richardson?
If Flacco plays the rest of the year, Mike, then
they'll make the playoffs.
I will tell people they need to go on their favorite sportsbook app and place that bet for Colts to make the postseason.
If Richardson's out, I feel better about them. I think Richardson's the worst quarterback, maybe Levis. The two worst quarterbacks in the league play in the South.
I mean, I was going to say I think Levis is worse, but it's kind of like a preference.
Half a dozen,
right?
one or the other. Levis and Richardson are the two. Well, the Miami situation's bad.
Well, the situation, right? But that's more than one guy.
Yeah, those guys are starters. The Miami situation, they're on their third backup already.
They're on the scrap heap.
They've gone through 4 quarterbacks already.
I know, it's amazing.
So there's my
it's actually
AFC.
impressive.
In the East, I've got Philadelphia. I do think Philadelphia, when they get healthy on offense, they will be very good offensively, and their defense, I think, will continue to get better as this season goes on. If their offense doesn't improve, getting A.J. Brown, Smith, and Johnson back, all right, then they got big problems. All right, then I'll concede. If they're not good enough with that group of talent returning,
right,
then they got big problems.
Right, because you're saying, look, when they come out of this bye week, if they're healthy, they got the Browns and the Giants coming up. Those are 2 very winnable games that should get them back on track.
The North, I've got Detroit. Although that one's starting to get tough. I think Detroit's pretty darn good, though.
What about the Vikings?
I think the Vikings are good, better than I thought. I think Detroit long-term is better.
So you're saying Detroit's going to have the staying power, whereas the Vikings are going to fade somewhere on the schedule.
Maybe. I don't know they're going to fade, but I think Detroit they're a game apart. You know, one team's 4-0, the other team's 3-1. Minnesota has wins. They've got to get more. They beat the Giants. They beat a banged-up Niners team. The win against the Texans was pretty good. And going on the road to Green Bay was a pretty solid win there.
That was an impressive win. I mean,
they play the Lions
them
in 2 weeks. They play the Jets this week, then the Lions.
2 big tests.
Yeah. I think Minnesota's, more on them coming up. In the South, I have Tampa.
Me too. I got Tampa too. I had them beginning of the year. I'm sticking with them since then. I know you were very hopeful, Mike, for the Falcons, but they fizzled a little bit.
Hey, 3-1, and then the other 2 teams are 2-2. They're all right there. I mean, this division I think is going to swirl around as well. You know, every team in the AFC West is 500 or better.
I see that.
And in the West, it's San Francisco.
Yeah, I just tend to think that at some point their injuries are going to.
Yeah, they're getting held up. Debo's back this past week.
Although the McCaffrey situation is weird.
It is, and he might not be back till November.
I mean, they might need to trade for a running back.
I will say I was impressed with Seattle last night. The first half was a little wonky for them, but in the second half, they hung around that game. They had some chances. Geno, I thought, had a great game.
When I saw that Geno threw the ball 55 times at the end of the game, I almost fell out of my seat.
Which is weird because I like both their backs. Walker's very good. Charbonnet's very good. I like that team, but I like Detroit. I think Detroit's very good is the problem. Detroit's pass secondary is not great.
Terry and Arnold had a rough night.
Yeah, he did. So there's my...
For all you Eagle fans, remember the Eagle fans were like, why didn't you draft the guy from Toledo instead of Alabama? We saw why last night.
Yep. Terry and Arnold had a rough night at the office. All right, wild cards. Washington. I think Washington, and I said it all offseason, if the kid Daniels can play, that team is going to be very surprising, and he can play.
He was my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Well, so. I liked him better than I liked Caleb Williams. So,
yep,
you're seeing why. I mean, Caleb Williams 2-2, and that's a flimsy 2-2. It's not a Caleb. It's not a Caleb Williams 2-2.
No, that's a. We happened to win a couple of games. We probably could have lost 2-2.
Minnesota.
Yep.
Seattle.
I got Seattle as a wild card as well. I like what Mike McDonald is doing up there. I think that he has kind of taken the Pete Carroll model and said, okay, I'm going to bring my own spin this. I'm not trying to make you guys be a different team. We're just going to win with the kind of talent that we have.
So the Colts would be Dallas.
I am out on Dallas.
Green Bay.
Green Bay is going to get their health situation figured out. I mean, Jair Alexander didn't play in the game.
And Watson's hurt again.
I mean, Watson, they say may miss multiple weeks coming up. And listen, Love, they might have brought him back too soon, honestly.
All of the South teams, Atlanta, New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that if the Saints figure things out again, they could get on a roll. If Kirk Cousins gets hot with the Falcons, they could go on a streak. So you could make an argument that either one of those teams could win a wild card spot.
And the Rams. I mean, they just have so many injury issues. Can they get healthy?
Dude, if the Rams can find a way to start winning some of these games instead of losing them, they could be scary. But you're right. They have, I saw all kinds of people getting excited because Tutu Atwell was catching passes for their fantasy team.
That's Who's Hot and Who's Cold, brought to you by Ace Hardware Home Services, Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. The helpful team is now making house calls in South Jersey. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services.com to book today. Last week, tomorrow was Find 5 Ugly 5. I couldn't find 5 good teams. I might not be able to find 5 uglies this week. Everybody's just mediocre.
They are. Too much parity.
All right, coming up, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform, at Mike Gill Show on YouTube, at Mike Gill Show, subscribe. Damian Woody has a take. You'll hear it next.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Nick Sirianni stinks. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm just going to tell it the way I see it. I feel like this team has not, whatever was going on last year has carried over to this year. I know they played that game down in New Orleans and they did well, but if you just take the total body work from the second half of last year to now, where's the improvement come?
That's Damian Woody on Unsportsmanlike this morning on 97.3 ESPN. It's a fair question. Where has the improvement come? Have we seen a team that looks markedly different? Here's the problem I have with all this stuff. We are judging a team that is not at full strength. Now, you might say, doesn't matter. And I could say, okay, fine, let's judge this team not at full strength. If I told you before the year, this team did not have Smith, Brown, Lane Johnson, you wouldn't tell me you thought this team was any good. So, of course, your opinion has changed. Right? Like if I say to you at the beginning of the year, hey, your receivers are Dotson, Johnny Wilson, and Paris Campbell. Fred Johnson's your right tackle. How many wins do you see? You'd say 4.
Right.
So, of course, the team doesn't look like they're any better. You can't make asinine statements like that and not have context to it. If you want to tell me the rest of the year they don't have Brown Smith and Lane Johnson, I'm going to tell you flat out this team will be awful. But if they get those guys back, does Damian Woody think that his comment's going to hold up? Or is he going to look like an idiot 4 weeks from now?
I think the problem with Damian Woody's statement is, the fact that, okay, if Sirianni stinks, then who's better? And I think part of the problem with these conversations, Mike, is that...
Well, the answer to that is quick and obvious to many people out there. You ask that question, you know the answer already. And Damian Woody could give you the answer because he played for him.
Well, the problem is that he didn't win anything without Brady.
It doesn't matter. You're asking a question that people have the answer to. And they have that answer on the tip of their tongue.
That's great, but it doesn't mean it's a good answer.
It might not be a good answer to you, but to everybody who follows football, they all think, and they're not wrong, to say that Bill Belichick's a better coach than Nick Sirianni is. So your question is, to me, not the question that needs to be answered, because everybody has an answer to that question. The question is, he's saying, what have they done that's better? Right now, that answer would be incomplete. If you're going to judge me on the current state of my team, then yes, you are right. This team does not look like it's gotten better. But, again, Damian Woody, in training camp, what did you say about this team's offense? I don't know what he said. I'm just asking hypothetically. Right. Did you think this team was going to be pretty good with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith playing wide receiver? And if you did, how do you ask the question, what are they doing better, when those guys aren't here?
Right.
It's an incomplete roster to judge right now. Let's have this conversation in November when those guys are back, and let's see what this offense looks like. You can't make a comment like that when you're judging a team when you know there's a guy who had a concussion and he's going to be back in a week. When you know there's a guy who was questionable last week with a hamstring. Now, it's a different situation. If you told me A.J. Brown was going to miss the next 6 to 8 weeks, now my conversation is, yeah, this team is going to struggle without A.J. Brown. That's fair.
I just would also say I would love to know what Damian Woody thinks about the coordinators. Because if Nick Sirianni is not calling the offensive defensive plays, then where does he put Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio?
Well, I think Kellen Moore is a tough spot because he's calling plays with an incomplete roster. You know, if I'm Kellen Moore and I came in here and I was like, man, I got A.J. Brown, I got Devontae Smith, and then you throw in my lap, I got Paris Campbell and Jahan Dotson, that's a lot different.
It's a lot different, but you're the man calling the plays. You should be in charge of figuring it out.
I get that, but all training camp, I had the other two guys. Now, on the fly, I have to work in 2 practice squad guys. Not enviable. Now, should they have been better? I think so. Yes, I do think they should have been better. But some of that comes over to the one guy who has been here, Jalen Hurts. All right, football at 4 is on the way. What did Adam Kaplan see in the game on Sunday? He joins us next on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
97.3 ESPN presents the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Kaplan, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I give my heart and soul to this franchise, as so many of us do.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
One of the things I think you have to be honest with yourself as a general manager is you assessed your problems, right? And Howie Roseman said, okay, I need better pass rushers. I need to fix my secondary, and I'm going to be okay, right? So he does that. He gets Bryce Huff. He gets rid of Riddick. You know, he keeps Sweat, but they haven't really fixed their D-line. Like, Jalen Carter got worn out. He played too many plays.
That was Mike Lombardi on the GM Shuffle podcast, asking whether or not this roster, did they do enough this offseason? Well, we'll get some thoughts on this roster. Some of the offensive line, the passing game, the pass rush, the tackling issues, and more on today's edition of Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget to check out their YouTube channel. Search Inside the Birds. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And here to answer some of those questions with us now, it's Adam Kaplan here from Inside the Birds podcast on today's Football at 4. Adam, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
Doing well, Mike. Hope you are and your audience. And yeah, it's wow. This team is interesting. Like there's no question about it. It's kind of like one day to the next. You have no idea. 1 week to the next, you don't know what you're going to get from this team. Right when you think you know. Although, look, they had some certain challenges on offense because the 2 best receivers were out. And that brings up a roster issue, which you were talking about. And you should know that because we have the time this week on Inside the Birds, we're going to delve into their signings, what we know from behind the scenes, how they're producing, not producing, why they're not producing, why they are doing well, why they're not doing well. We're going to get into that, Mike. We've got a lot of time with the team on a bye, so we're going to the draft. We're going to look at their draft. We're going to look at their past 3 drafts, not just this one. We're going to go into a lot how the coaching has been behind the scenes from what we understand. A lot of stuff we wouldn't talk about here on Football 4 because we don't have the time, and we have, on our podcast usually do an hour show. So we look forward to that, and also tonight with Greg Cosell, only for Patreon, patreon.com/Inside the Birds. We're going to have Greg for half an hour with our members, and they take over. They kind of run it. They ask the questions, Greg responds, and they have some great conversations. I cannot wait for this one tonight. I've not talked to Greg so far this week. I can't imagine the tape's very good, but we'll find out tonight.
Yeah, this is one of those bye weeks where it's the self-scouting. What did you find out about your team? And this is a team that at 2-2, you're 500. Yet it seems like there's more questions than absolutes here. So let's get some final thoughts on the things that we saw in Tampa, and then the big picture here of Jalen Hurts. What did we see from Hurts? Obviously, they're shorthanded at receiver. They're shorthanded on the offensive line with Lane Johnson out. We know the history of this team when he is out. But give us some thoughts on what we saw from Jalen Hurts' game and how he either contributed or helped this team in the loss to Tampa.
Yeah, Mike, this is just me, based on the information I have. I really do think 2 things. The offensive line issues and the protection had its issues, right? Fred Johnson, particularly, at right tackle, filling in for Lane Johnson. This is the one game where it really showed me that Hurts was worried about not having Brown and Smith, not having Lane Johnson at right tackle. He just seemed to react to not only pressure, but pressure wasn't there, not taking throws that were there. You could only blame, Mike, not having the 2 great receivers. You could blame it. You could put the blame on him on that for the reasons, but you also have to be able to hit passes that are there, and Jalen has not really done that this season. I saw a lot of this last season when he really struggled. It had nothing to do with injuries. It was more that, okay, this throw was there. Why didn't he make the throw? We're really seeing a lot of that this season. Now, Mike, he also is capable. Really strong arm. That's never been a problem. That's the one attribute that he has not lost. Like, he doesn't run that well anymore, Mike. We don't talk enough about that. He doesn't look like the same runner from 2 years ago. Let's call it like it is. He's just not. The tape shows it. There's certain stuff you can't challenge. The tape does not lie. We brought this up last year, and inside the birds, Hurts doesn't look like the same runner he once was. Then he got hurt. He had the knee injury. Well, he clearly does not. He looks sluggish. He's in fine shape, and he looked good in training camp with it. But man, he looks sluggish running it. But the one issue, Mike, that has not changed, he's got a strong arm that's never been in question. Once Smith and particularly Brown gets back, you're gonna see that deeper passing game come back. But there's just so many things that have happened this season, Mike, that you can't really predict. You could talk about in training camp. Oh, we saw the lack of pass rush. Okay, that's happened. It's been terrible in the regular season. But I was expecting when the scheme we talked about this, Mike, when Kellen Moore was hired. The first nugget we had is we talked to coaches that work with Kellen Moore. The first thing we were told back in February was that this is a quarterback-friendly scheme. Quarterbacks love playing in it. I don't quite understand what's going on, why it has not been as good. Look, Kellen's he's got a good scheme here. We've seen some really good things. But why has Hurts not been good enough yet? That's a big question based on what you asked me.
Well, before we get to the offensive line issues, because they certainly had their problems there, Fred Johnson. But the passing game, without Brown and Smith, how much does that change the passing game when you've got Dotson, Johnny Wilson, and Paris Campbell? And I got to say, it looks like Hurts just has a complete lack of trust in those guys.
That's the point. Like, I get it. Johnny Wilson shouldn't be out there, okay? He's a blocking receiver. It sounds kind of comical, but that's what he is. He doesn't run well enough. He can't get open on his own. If you've got if Jahan Dotson was a good number 3, he clearly is not. He's just struggling. To be honest with you, if Brown and Smith are playing Dotson's the 3, look, you'd rather have someone else as the 4. Wilson's not. By the way, Britton Covey was doing very well. By the way, okay, he's doing pretty well before he suffered the shoulder fracture. You'd have Wilson just come in and block. That's it. Okay, he just can't. He can't really help you as a receiver. Paris Campbell, by the way, is now on the practice squad. He did score on a roll to the right, kind of more of a scramble. Paris Campbell's a 4 or 5 at this point, right? Then you got the John Ross issue. John Ross, Mike, let's not forget, John Ross was cut before the 53. The initial 53 is set. Nobody wanted him. He wasn't even on anyone's practice squad. The reason why the Eagles brought him back is because they ran out of receivers. So, look, I get that part. That's not Jalen's fault. But there were times these guys got open. They didn't get the football. I can't. That plays to your point. Maybe he doesn't trust, and that's a very fair point. Well, the non-trust hurts the football team. You got to pull the trigger, and Jalen's got the longest snap to release numbers in the NFL. That's not good. It's taken way too long for him. He's still indecisive, Mike. We saw a ton of this last season. There's some stuff that he controls, Mike. He doesn't control who's available. He does control when there's guys who'll be on throw. That's on him. Well,
and listen, all around the league, I know you look at it in Washington, Zacchaeus did nothing here. He's been a productive receiver for that team. I know, by the way, Brian Johnson is on that staff, and he doesn't seem to be an idiot any longer. That said, Sterling Shepard is coming off the practice squad. He's out there making plays. And I get it. He has Evans and Godwin that take more of the attention, but when Shepard has a ball thrown to him, he's making a play. So there are some times we have to say, hey, the guys are out there. You have to trust them to make the play. So I don't know if that's more on Hurts or more on the lack of talent that they have.
Mike, and we'll find out from Greg Cosell tonight how open these guys got. Look, John Dotson's a problem. We reported this exclusively when they made the trade. We told our Patreon members exactly why the Washington wanted him off the roster. Lack of competition, just not competing.
Yeah.
Not being ready. It was pretty bad. And Mike, he's been a big disappointment here so far.
And as Mosher said yesterday on Football at 4, he took a lot of heat from people saying, because he said, you gave up a 3rd-round pick for this guy, and he thought that was a little bit of a high number for a guy who really hasn't done much.
Mike, it really should have been like a 6. It could have been a 5 based on production or snap counts or something.
Yep.
Now listen, with Dotson, the only thing I'll defend is 3 schemes. He's had to learn 3 schemes. He had the first one with Ron Rivera that he had to learn, right? He had that one, which also changed, by the way, when Scott Turner was let go. Then you've got the Cliff Kingsbury offensive coordinator. He came in, had to learn that one. And then now he had to learn the Kellen Moore offense. By the way, they're all different. All three schemes are different. That's not Dotson's fault. What's Dotson's fault is competing and making yourself a pass target. I could tell you as a fact, Washington did not want him. I don't know if they would have cut him, but I know they were going to find any way to get him off the roster via trade, and they found in their division, Mike, how could you defend that, right? If you're the biggest Eagles fan, how can you defend the fact that Washington said, we're fine trading to our division? What does that tell you?
Yeah, sometimes things feel too good to be true, and now maybe you're seeing why. Let's, the offensive line we hinted at, issues. You had Fred Johnson, not Lane Johnson. You then had Juergens leave. Dickerson had to move over and play some center. You had Steen go in. So they had all sorts of issues up front. But, man, 6 sacks in the game. What were the problems with the offensive line up front?
Yeah, and they didn't handle the blitz well, Mike. See, these delayed blitzes, I thought Todd Bowles, really, his scheme was really, really good. I thought he did a great job of making Hurts kind of indecisive. By the way, they know Fred Johnson. He was cut by the Bucs 2 years ago, so they know Fred Johnson. It was sort of a reclamation project for Jeff Stoutland. It didn't work well there. There's no question. They had protection issues on their left side, by the way. Cam Juergens is a good football player, though. That's one thing. That's one positive. He's played well. We haven't really talked about him very much. He's unfortunately left due to, hydration.
Yeah, cramps.
That didn't help. And the other cramps. The other thing is, Mike, I do want to mention, I understand they couldn't go down there early to Tampa because of the weather, the hurricane issue, but it's one thing if there are one or two players of hydration or cramp issues, but it was at least a half a dozen, Mike. That's on their training staff. I don't know what the hell happened there. That's disappointing. That should not have happened. I understand. We talked about this on our Friday show on Inside the Birds. Keep an eye on the weather because it's going to be in the low 90s. The real field temperature is supposed to be in the high 90s. Guess what? It wound up being 110 plus. I get that, but you got to do a better job getting your guys ready.
Yeah, it was brutal down there, as you could see, all over the place on the television. Just everybody who Sal Powell in the morning doing the hits on ESPN, he was sweating away. What's her name on ESPN or Fox sideline? Erin Andrews, she was sweating away. So you could tell that it was. Brady mentioned it over and over on the broadcast how hot it was and how much of a advantage they thought it was early in the season to play home games. That said, the offensive line issues, a big problem for them. And they hope to get Lane. I guess Lane wanted to play. He didn't clear, so he should be back, when they play. The passing game, we would imagine that Brown and Smith will both be back after the bye?
Well, Brown for sure, barring something. He'd have to have a setback. Smith, let me just explain something, Mike. I've covered concussions for nearly 25 years, and I know the protocol pretty well. He didn't progress. Mike, he was never even out there at practice. You worry about light sensitivity issues, which Lane Johnson didn't have, by the way. Lane was there, seen on Wednesday. And Lane also wound up practicing a little bit.
And he traveled with the team.
Yep, and he traveled. In fact, Jay Glazer, my old friend Jay from Fox Sports, Jay said he talked to Lane. We should mention this. He talked to Lane. Lane said he passed Saturday. Now, I don't know if Lane passed it when he got there in Tampa, or did he pass Saturday morning? But he passed, and then Sunday morning, he said two doctors. Jay didn't mention, Glazer didn't mention, were they team doctors? We don't know. They decided to hold him out, which they're allowed to do. By the way, you should know with the protocol, you have to pass the team doctors testing, and the final one is with the independent neurologist. But I don't know why a couple of doctors held him out. Look, with Lane's history, I get that. But we'll obviously monitor this, so he'll definitely be back unless he has a setback. But let's just cool our jets with Devontae. Let's let him get out there and practice, start working before we say he's definitely playing.
All right.
But the Eagles, because I've learned my lesson. I reported ESPN when I was told by a source close to Jay Cutler he's playing. He had a headache. He had a slight headache, Mike. And when you have a slight headache, by the way, with the protocol, you have to go back to step one. You can't pass then. No matter what day of the week it is, you have to start over. So you have to know that going in. But I just, Mike, one thing I do want to mention, the Eagles now have learned that they're going to have to do a better job of evaluating their backup receiver group. I understand there's always going to be a downgrade. My mom knows that when you go from Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. But they've got to do a better job of getting better backups in there. They've got this is on Howie Roseman and his personnel staff. They've got to do a better job of bringing in players here that could compete at a higher level. This is just not acceptable.
Yeah. By the way, as some breaking news, Davante Adams has informed the team he'd like to be traded. So there's a guy who's pretty good. But
well, did you see this one? Did you
he's
see
not coming here, by the way.
By the way, Antonio Pierce favorited.
Yes.
Had a favorite on social media. Antonio, my old friend from ESPN.
The social media stories that are happening right now in the NFL, it's too much, man. The Slay, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Devin White on Sunday, it's becoming too much. Huff scrubbing his account like many. It's just becoming too much.
Yeah, exactly. It is, it's a world we live in, but 9 times out of 10 these things don't become a story, but the Davante Adams one's clear because he's had enough. And it seems like the Raiders, who I remember talking to in the spring about Adams, is like, no, we're trying to win. Here's the thing, like, they're 2-2. I know it's very early. They have nobody who could replace Davante Adams. I would think they want to get a receiver back, but we'll see.
All right, let's look at a couple of the pass rush and the tackling. Today I thought Fangio was interesting. He's saying, well, we told the corners that they needed to get closer to the line. They just didn't do it. I thought that was bizarre. Bad tackling. He said 15 missed tackles. So, in other words, did we put players in position to make plays and they just didn't make them? And the pass rush has been a constant problem.
Let's go to the latter first. The pass rush is – we talked on Football at 4 a lot in training camp, preseason, that there was a major concern with the pass rush. Obviously, I underestimated it. It's so bad, Mike. I can't believe this. The Eagles have always had a good pass rush, sometimes better than others. I'd have to actually look it up. I can't remember an Eagles front 7 being this bad getting to the quarterback. This is almost historically bad. Yes, they got their edges, got their first 2 sacks, still inconsequential. It's just, I don't know, Mike. Huff he's been a big zero. He's wearing number 0. He hasn't done it. He clearly cannot be a stand-up pass rusher. The Eagles do play some wide 9, which is what he played in, by the way, with the Jets. They do that nickel, but it's not working. He's not comfortable in it. And Fangio said today, we don't drop him much. Well, he's not comfortable, right? Jalen Carter got doubled. He just couldn't get to the quarterback. We know Jordan Davis can't rush the passer at all. Josh Sweat is not the player he once was. He's trying, and he's making an effort. Nolan Smith has done next to nothing, Mike. BG's doing what he can. He still could play. They don't have a quality pass rusher right now. They just don't, Mike. There's nothing they can do. Jalen Son, by the way, we should mention, got his first snaps on defense. He got 5. So we'll see what happens going forward.
Yep, the pass rush has been terrible, and the tackling, I don't know how you get any better at that at this stage of the season.
Well, what's interesting, Mike? There are a couple teams that will tackle in season only a couple times for a very short time. Like you might do 3 minutes in a practice just to get used to doing it. But as Sirianni talked about it, you can't get your players hurt, and you just can't. So that's why teams generally don't do it. You watch tape. Fangio talked about it today. You work on technique, but you can't. You could do a thud period, which is use an elbow or shoulder, but you don't take them to the ground. That's what thud is. They got a problem. Like now, Bill Polian, the Hall of Fame general manager, told us at Inside the Birds a couple of years ago that it's between the first 4 and 6 weeks tackling is bad around the NFL. It usually evens itself out, but it's going to take some time.
All right, Adam Kaplan, let's, it's funny. We, all preseason, we take a look at the different teams, go inside the NFC East, and here are, as you would call them, the Commandos.
I can't believe it,
Woo, baby, 3-1, and they look like they're ascending upwards, while Philly and Dallas look like they're going backwards.
Yeah, so with the Commanders, look, they got blown out week 1 at Tampa, right? They've been good since then. Now, they've had a very good schedule, and guess what? They play the awful Browns this week. They host them. Then they play at the Ravens. They'll probably lose that. They don't have to go very far. Then they host the Panthers and the Bears. So they could actually, and I think they might play the Eagles after that. But so this is set up very well. The Cowboys who are 2-2, they have a tough schedule. They're at the Steelers. They host the Lions. They're at the Niners and at the Falcons, Mike. And they're 2-2, and they're not playing particularly well. They got very lucky against the Giants. That phantom call on the Giants for the hold. It was a face mask on the defender. That was terrible. The Giants, who lost that game, they're 1-3. They're at Seattle. They host the Bengals. Then they host the Eagles and at the Steelers. They're more competitive, Mike, than probably most people thought. Daniel Jones playing a little bit better. But the Commanders are the one. I know they were the sexy pick, and I didn't quite agree with it. It's just very early, Mike. They've had a good schedule, and I give them credit. They've been able to win it, and Jane Daniels processes extremely well for a rookie. He's so far ahead, Mike, of most rookie quarterbacks. But let's see what happens when their schedule gets better or harder. But they're a great story, no question about it.
All right, before we rock out of here on this Football at 4, Adam Kaplan, Fangio, a couple quick things on some injury stuff. Sidney Brown, they said they could open the window for him. So let's start with him. If Sidney Brown is healthy and active, does he have a role on this defense?
Well, certainly not week one. He hasn't practiced since January. So, as Vic said, they got to start working him in practice. But whenever he gets clear to play, yeah, look, it's we know that Gardner Johnson and Blankenship are starters. Okay, that's not going to change anytime soon. But Gardner Johnson, by the way, he's got to tackle better, Mike. That's a problem.
Big time.
Yeah, and by the way, he's not making the plays like he used to, where he was elite 2 years ago. Mike, when healthy, he was phenomenal. So that's something to watch. That look, they have very poor safety depth, and they can't play Tristan McCall in these kind of snaps that they did in this game. And we know that that this is not that advantageous. But it'll just be a situation where they'll have to figure out his role because Vic has never coached him, and that's certainly and the DB's coach wasn't working with him before. So they'll work that in and they'll figure that out. But he'll be their top backup safety once he's ready.
All right, Cooper DeJean, what's the read on what his future might be?
Yeah, they only played one snap on defense, Mike, but. What we had said before the season started, their plan was before he got hurt is he was going to compete for a nickel role. Well, it just so happens Avonte Maddox is not playing particularly well, so we expect Maddox to start losing that job, losing snaps to DeJean going forward after the bye. And I know Cooper. The other thing is, Mike, DeJean right now is their punt returner, and they got to get their special teams right. Man, these gaffes, Mike, are embarrassing. This can't happen. At least they had the great play by Isaiah Rodgers. Obviously, Rodgers had a bonehead play, which can't happen. They have to figure out, Anaya Smith also, by the way, could punt return later on when he comes off IR. But if DeJean starts playing a nickel and they decide to take him off punt returns, then they're going to have to take a look at, well, who else can do it? That to me is not easy because they don't really have a natural punt returner. Isaiah Rodgers is a better kickoff returner. So is Will Shipley, by the way. So is Gainwell. I have to go back and look at my notes and see who else. Paris Campbell could punt return, by the way. By the way, he's out of elevations, Mike. So if they want to own the roster, they'd have to sign him off and release somebody or make room for him.
Great. All right. There you go. Football 4, Adam Kaplan, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can download on all podcasting platforms. And check out the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds and get their Patreon stuff. Greg Cosell is going to be their guest. It's going to be a really good one. And, of course, Football at 4 all week right here on the Sports Bash. All right, Adam. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, there he goes. Adam Kaplan, everybody, from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. So a lot there, and it's, of course, brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm Mike Hill. This hour is brought to you by Jersey Cal, a great place for the family to hang out and eat ice cream. It's open every day from noon to 10. At both their Northfield and Brigantine locations, ice cream is a year-round thing at Jersey Cal. Takeaways from Adam Kaplan. The offensive line, a big problem in that game on Sunday. But when we come back, Nick's Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw is here to give us today's Nuggets, and they're next on the Sports Bash.
You're listening.
Discover the fun and inspiration of live music with a night out at the San Francisco Symphony. Experience legendary symphonies by Brahms and Beethoven. And don't miss the rush of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, Elgar's much-loved Enigma variations, and Symphony No. 39, a true Mozart masterwork. The San Francisco Symphony is where virtuosos come to play, and favorites enchant again and again. Tickets are available at sfsymphony.org.
With Mike Gill.
Never thought this radio stunt would catch on so big.
On 97.3 ESPN.
All right, 429 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. This hour is brought to you by Jersey Cal. 2 locations, Northfield, Brigantine, noon to 10. Ice cream's a year-round thing at Jersey Cal. Love the fall flavors. As we get into the real fall, Red October, Nick Earnshaw's here with another edition of Nick's Nuggets on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe and watch the show. Nick's Nuggets are brought to you by the Fanatic Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Get your game on at the Gallery, Bar, Book, and Games at Ocean Casino this football season. Go to the Fanatic Sportsbook. Go to Ocean. Go for the win. For more info, visit OceanAC.com. All right, by the way, we got playoff baseball. By the way, when the Phillies traded Matt Vierling away, who had him leading off for Detroit in a playoff game? Did we ever envision Matt Vierling hitting leadoff for a playoff team? I mean, unbelievable turn of events. They're up 3-0 in this game over here, by the way. Scooble's throwing a gem. And, you got Vierling hitting leadoff. He would have been a nice right-handed bat playing left field for you now. He's playing third base for them, but here he would have been nice in left field like he played when he was here. He actually played center when he was here a little bit.
Yeah, what's going on, Mike? Baseball postseason, Red October, October 1st. It's upon us. It's one of the best times of the year, Mike. You know, it's hoodie and shorts weather. It's the best time. Matt Vierling, I mean, leading off for the Detroit Tigers, they're beating the Stros. How about that? 3-0. That's pretty crazy. Could you imagine the Detroit Tigers upset those Houston Astros? That would be pretty wild.
Crazy.
They could use the Phillies could use a Matt Vierling in left field.
Well, listen, you know, the Astros had a unbelievable second half. You know, the Mariners had an unbelievable collapse in the second half, and the Astros took advantage of that. But on the other side of the coin, you had the Tigers, who at one point had a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs, and they end up making the playoffs, passing Minnesota and getting themselves in. So the Royals, the Guardians, and the Tigers all in the Central got in. And what an unbelievable story the Tigers have become. And now they're up 3-0 in this first game.
Yeah, and they kind of sold at the deadline. Like, it was kind of like, we're kind of done. But they had a great second half and found themselves into the postseason. I don't love starting the postseason in the afternoon on a middle of Tuesday. I mean, they could have at least started a little later.
Yeah, I know this. By the way, the Orioles are playing the Royals right now, so you got the games all day long. I kind of like, I don't like playoff games being played in the middle of the day. I will give you that. They don't have the same feel.
No.
But I do like live sports on during, like yesterday, the doubleheader was awesome having that. I'm just glad the Phillies, don't have to play these after, like they played a couple of times when I've been on the air in the playoffs. I hate that, but I do like a live game on in the middle of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, right? You can sneak it on your phone at work. If you're in school, you go on one of your laptops and you're watching the game instead of paying attention to the class. Like in March Madness, that's kind of what you do growing up in high school. So there's ways around it. It makes it a little more intriguing, right? Like,
today, half the people are working at home. We have a TV behind us here in the studio. I mean, I don't get to see the TV's behind me, so I can't really, focus on
breaks, though.
Yeah, during the commercial breaks, I'll turn around and watch it.
Yeah.
No, but listen, this Detroit team, I would imagine that 98% of our listening audience can't name 3 guys on the Tigers.
No, I'm sure they can. I mean, listen, the Tigers, they were out of it. They were selling at the deadline. Nobody expected this team to make it to the postseason. And the fact they have Matt Vierling leading off, that tells you everything. Baseball is just a wonky sport, to say the least.
Yeah, their lineup today is 9 guys that no one's ever heard of and Scooble.
Yes, Terry Scooble, who has been fantastic. He is lights out, lighting up these Houston Astros, throwing gas against the Astros. I would love to see the Tigers beat the Astros. That would be awesome.
Yeah, you got Vierling, Malloy, Green, Ibanez, Perez, Torkelson, Meadows, Rogers, and Sweeney. There you go.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. That team, that's a playoff roster right there. It's crazy. The fact they won 86 games this year.
By the way, I know we talked about this back when he got released, but Hector Neris came in, 2/3 of an inning, 2 strikeouts.
How about that? He's, the Phillies could have used him. They could have used him when he got cut. They could have picked him up, but they decided not to. I think they'll have enough. Through the postseason as, Red October begins, Mike. And the Phillies, they're having an inter squad. I mean, they're picking teams. Turnbull's back, Mike. How about that?
He's pitching.
He's going to make an appearance in the inter squad game. He's going to be pitching. They're betting. The Phillies are betting on these scrimmages as well. Dave Dombrowski spoke to the media today saying, I'm not going to get too much into it, but the players have a little something on this scrimmage that's coming up. What do you make of Turnbull coming back? I mean, we talked about the rosters last week. Is he going to be on there? It seems like he's healthy enough. He's been out since June 26th. Back Turnbull's going to be pitching live batting practice, live scrimmage. That's a good sign, I think, for the Phillies in case they need him.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're going to judge him on this thing and to see if he's available to help this team out come playoff time, because we talked about it the other day. If you go with 14 position players and 12 pitchers, that 12th pitcher, I don't know who that guy's going to be. I mean, it could be Taijuan Walker. It could be Max Laser. It could be Gilbert. I mean, he came in the other day. Phillips isn't getting that job. No. It could be Kobe Allard. But it could be Spencer Turnbull if he pitches well. And look, to me, they should be playing these games almost every day. They should be getting the best available minor league arms they have. Kids that are maybe not polished or ready, but can go up there and throw gas and get them live at bats because you know what? You go get a kid who's a single A, double A, Mick Abel, McGarry, your best single A pitchers, get them up here. You know why? Because they're going to go inside Citizens Bank Park and look at this as an opportunity to try to impress. So they're going to have the intensity that Dave Dombrowski's talking about. It's hard for a guy to have intensity if you're saying, hey, you're facing Taijuan Walker in an inter-squad game. But you throw Mick Abel out there, Abel's saying, this is my opportunity to show I belong. I'm facing Bryce Harper right here. And that's what I think this team needs to do. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is face the best arms in your organization to get live at bats.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, bring them up because these guys are hungry, right? You want to bring up those prospects who have been talked about over and over again, guys who didn't trade at the trade deadline to improve your team, right? So you want to bring those guys up. They're going to be hungry. They want to be on the big club next year, like guys like Mick Abel, et cetera. McGarry, another one. Prospects that have been talked about for years that they've held on to and have not traded but have not progressed through that minor league system the way they thought. So throw them out there. So, they're getting these guys who are hungry and ready ready to get to the big league. I'm with you there. I think that's a great point. And then also they're going to be pumping the crowd noise in as well to make it feel as close as a full stadium as possible. Because Red October, it's going to get loud in there. But, this is what happens. You have a couple days off. You're going to have the scrimmages. They're going to bet on it. They're picking teams like it's backyard baseball, Mike. I mean, they're picking each team. It's pretty crazy.
I'll tell you what I would have done. I would have opened the gates and said, come on in. Come on in and give me some atmosphere in this joint here.
But doesn't that ruin the build-up, though? The build-up to the actual thing? I don't know. I think it ruins the build-up.
$5 tickets. You could have made a couple bucks on it and had the place get a little bit of energy. I think there's a way that you can – listen, is there a perfect scenario when you have a week off and you have to sit like this? No, there is not. But, hey, get some people in that building. Get me my best young arms I have in the organization and let them try to make a name for themselves. This is the time to do it.
Yep, and, you're going to get Turnbull back, so you're going to see what he's got. Remember, he's a guy that could come in a spot if you need him, right? Or if you need to burn an arm, whatever it may be. And you're thinking about how many batters and how many hitters you're going to have on this roster compared to pitchers. Turnbull can make a case, hey, I'm back, I'm ready, I want to be on this roster. We'll see how it shakes out, depending on how many pitchers they want to keep, especially from the DS. Because remember, last year, their wild card roster was different from the NLDS roster, right? So it depends how it shakes out. And, they can see the Mets or the Brewers. So it's going to be fascinating to see what the roster looks like after this wild card series. Because, they have a few days here.
There's another guy who you could possibly take a look at, and I'm not saying to make the roster.
Oh, no.
What about letting Andrew Painter get up on the mound for an inning?
Oh, bring him in. I mean, he hasn't. He's pitched a few.
He's been throwing.
Yeah, he's been throwing. But
the reports are that he's hit 99 on the gun.
All right. Oh, for the scrimmage. You're just saying for the scrimmage.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not talking about putting him on the roster. I said let him throw an inning in an inter-squad game.
Yeah.
Now you're like the listeners. You're not listening to what I'm saying.
No, I let it go in one ear and out the other. No, I'm just kidding. With Painter, I think, that would be a great opportunity for him to get some live pitching, see live hitters, have the crowd noise pumped in, et cetera. I think that would be good for these young players. I don't think they'll do it. They're probably going to pitch Turnbull, see what he's got. So
they're not probably going to pitch Turnbull. They're definitely pitching Turnbull. He's one of the guys who's already been announced that's going to throw. Yes. Yep.
So here we go. All right. Nugget number 2. Have you seen, so with the game starting today, we talked about this a couple weeks ago on the Nuggets. The ads are on the helmets, Mike. I don't know if you got to turn around
I see
your commercial break and you saw the ads on the helmets. I mean, is it getting ridiculous? Now that we've seen it in person, we've finally seen these games get rolling. Now with the ads on the helmet, is it just over the top?
The first thing I did when I turned around during one of the commercial breaks, I turned around and they had a close-up right on the guy's head. I said, oh, my God, I totally forgot about it. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get numb to it almost immediately. I mean, what are you going to do? But it is a little weird to see it. Yes, there are already ads on the helmets for these playoff games. It's a German company. What's it, Strauss?
Yeah, Strauss.
Yeah. I don't like it. I mean, but you're pretty much going to be used to it, almost like the IBX thing. Like, you don't even notice it's there probably anymore.
Yeah, but now that's going to be on Philly's red helmet. It's going to be pretty big on there. You're going to notice it. I feel like it blended into the black helmet a little more for the Tigers, a darker shade of navy, whatever it may be. But I think it's going to stand out on that red helmet a little bit. Like, you're going to see it and you're like, here we go. Like, why can't the teams get their own sponsors? You got to have one sponsor. Get your own sponsor at that point. That's what I would say about these ads on the helmets. It's just getting out of hand, but that's something you have to get ready for on Saturday, Red October. You're going to have the big ad on the helmet. That's where Major League Baseball is headed, unfortunately.
Yeah, that started today.
Yep. So that's nugget number 2. We got to move on to nugget number 3. We got to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, Mike. Switch gears a little bit. Darius Slay going on Micah Parsons' podcast. I mean, just horrible timing. Now, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. They probably scheduled this a while ago. Just like, being in the media biz, we know how things work, right? I think it was probably scheduled beforehand. He didn't just jump on Parsons' podcast. It was probably scheduled for a while, but what bad timing. And then talk about CJ GJ on the podcast, and then CJ GJ putting a cryptic note on his Instagram story out earlier. This is just a mess. Slay has been all over social media, tweeting and deleting. Can't have that from one of your top leaders, your captains on defense.
I hate all these stories. I hate Huff scrubbing his thing because I don't care. I don't care about Devin White liking something, then saying, oh, I didn't mean to do that. He's my buddy. You know why? Because I can't relate to this stuff. It's just a different era. Like, I love what Trey Thomas said. I can never imagine Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor, Sheldon Brown, Lito Shepherd going on DeMarcus Ware's podcast to talk about Brian Dawkins. No, we can't envision that because it's just not the way that things were back then. So all of these stories, I can't even comprehend that Darius Slay would go on the podcast with Micah Parsons and then talk about a teammate's performance on the podcast in the middle of the season. Hey, in the off season, maybe if he went on Micah Parsons' show in the off season and say, hey, that game we played against you guys and you got some insight there, that's different. But in season that this is all going on, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and we're living in the age of pettiness, right? Like you mentioned Huff scrubbing his social media of all Eagle stuff, right? Like, that's legitimate now. Like, those type of stories are legitimate into getting a sense of what that player's feeling, right? Like it's not just like something you should brush over. Like, that's a legitimate story now. In today's day and age, when you're scrubbing social media, the team you play for, that means something's up because we live in the age of petty. That is actually a big deal with the way, fans have been talking about Huff, the disappointment he's been, the trade discussions. I know you can't trade for Hassan Reddick, but they've been thrown out there. All that stuff. The things with social media, when players do stuff like that, it has meaning behind it. It's not just like, oh yeah, let me just go scrub everything for the current team I play for. That's a legitimate story in today's day and age. I know some people might not understand or get it, But that is a story now because of where we are with social media and how impactful it is today.
Yeah, and listen, this team has enough problems. You don't need distraction going on in their own locker room between, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Darius Slay not now seeing eye to eye potentially. So that's where it's not necessary. You don't need this. I'll tell you what I do like, though. The guy who's the owner, he's a West Virginia grad, by the way, who owns the Arizona Diamondbacks. Have you seen this story?
Yes, I have.
So he was on a Arizona radio station. You talk about social media and all this accountability. He went out on the radio station and said, you know what? I am an idiot because I'm the one who wanted our team to sign Jordan Montgomery, and Montgomery sucked this year. So blame me for recommending that. I love the accountability. Now, I don't know how that's going to go over with Montgomery because he got a 2-year deal. So he's going to have to be there and say to the owner, yo, man, what's up? But guess what? Good for the owner for finally saying, we're always trying to protect everybody. How about just being bluntly honest sometimes, and maybe your performance will improve? When I was in middle school, there used to be a teacher. He would say to me all the time, the floggings will continue until your morale improves. Now, he wasn't beating me, but his point was, I'm going to continue to be tough on you until you start to pick up your act. Well, guess what, Jordan Montgomery? The owner vouched for you. You let him down. He has every right to come out and say you let him down and that you stunk this year. Kudos to Kendrick.
Yeah, accountability there from the Arizona Diamondbacks. No, remember, Mike, remember the beginning of the season? The group chat, A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, and Devin White, it was called accountability. Don't we remember that story with the Philadelphia Eagles? Where's the accountability right now? What is going on? Did that group chat get deleted? Did they kick Darius Slay out? Who's left in that group chat? Apparently there's no accountability with this Philadelphia Eagles team.
Well, it's funny too because he was voted to be a team captain, so he obviously has the respect of his team. I don't know where this all came from and why he would go out of his way. Quite frankly, I didn't listen to it. I don't even know what he said, but I did see that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson responded, and quite frankly, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson should keep his pie hole shut too. He's had I was a big fan of the signing. He came over here and you thought, okay, this guy's going to be a playmaker, interceptions, bring this team something they didn't have last year. He's been a big disappointment. Other than the one tackle he made to make that stop in the Atlanta game, they ended up losing anyway. He's been a major disappointment. So Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, all your antics and all that stuff, you've been a disappointment. Ken Kendrick should tell him he stinks too.
Yeah, now you need Jeffrey Lurie to come on 97.3 ESPN and be like, hey, CJ has been a terrible signing from this offseason. We brought him back. We thought he'd be better than this.
He's been disappointing, no?
Yeah, no, he can't make a tackle. He missed every tackle last week, it felt like. It was ridiculous with CJ.
Yeah.
But, Slay to go on a Dallas Cowboy podcast and talk about his teammate and the trash talk and all this. Come on. He's got to be better than that. Slay's been tweeting and deleting, too. It's a mess right now.
We got messes all over the place, too. You got Devontae Adams. He now wants to be traded. Yep. You got all this stuff all the time. It's everywhere all the time. You got Rodgers and Saleh. You got this. Yeah, it's too much.
There's a lot of drama going on in the NFL right now, to say the least. All right, let's move along to the final nugget. Nugget number 4. So there was a big discussion on social media talking about the pre-snap motion with the Philadelphia Eagles. They had none of it last year, right? And now this year you thought bringing in Kellen Moore would be a lot more pre-snap motion. You saw a lot of it in week 1 with A.J. Brown in the lineup, right? Now it looks at this point in the season, you're 4 games in, heading to the bye week 5 here early on in the season. They're 19th in pre-snap motion right now in the league, Mike. That's the percentage they're at. They're at 19th. Total in the league. You thought it'd probably be a little higher than that, but I think some of the injuries have a lot to do with this right now. And then you also have to remember, Hurts was learning a lot of new things in the offense. Remember, this is another coordinator throughout his career. It's been almost every single year of his career feels like that he's had a new coordinator other than Steichen for the 2 years. So with them being 19 in the pre-snap motion, not as creative as some people thought they may be, how much is it Hurts learning the new offense? And then Sirianni, he may still have a significant impact and say on what's going on offensively. I think that's what has to do with it.
I'm going to choose to reserve judgment on this offense until they get back to full strength. They were really full strength in one game this year offensively, and I thought they looked pretty good in that game against the Green Bay Packers. After that, they lost Brown. They played the game without Brown and only Smith. This week, they didn't have Brown and Smith and Lane Johnson. I can't make a real fair judgment on what this offense is without those three key players. I don't really think that's, that's a good representation of what this offense is. So maybe, you got Kellen Moore putting all this stuff in and saying, well, I can't run this stuff with Johnny Wilson and Paris Campbell and Jahan Dotson in those roles. I just can't do the same thing. So I'm going to reserve judgment. I said, let me look at this offense in November. If we're in November, we're still talking about an offense, because I would imagine when they play Cleveland in 2 weeks, you're going to have Brown back. Hopefully you get Smith back. Lane Johnson should be back. At that point, this offense should start to get back, clicking and looking the way that we thought it should look. And if it doesn't, then we can start having the conversation.
Yeah, I think when you get the guys back from injury, you could start getting a real sense of what this offense is and how it's supposed to be run. Because I think some of the stuff, you can't run it with Jahan Dotson, you can't run it with Johnny Wilson. Now you're trying to run Calcaterra, Goddard, these two tight end sets. I think that's a good point, because the way the offense is run, it just hasn't been the same without all of these key players. I think couple weeks, then we could get a real sense of what this offense will be with the right guys in.
All right, there you go. There are today's nuggets from Nick Earnshaw. Check out the Shift podcast. I know this time of the season, playoffs are here. You guys are going to probably have some great content for the Shift podcast. And don't forget, Weekends in the Locker Room with Billy Schweim. He's the producer, Nick Earnshaw, and he's the host of not Football at 4. He's the host of Nick's Nuggets.
I join Inside the Birds with those guys?
Yes.
I didn't know.
He's the host of Nick's Nuggets every day here on the Sports Bash. All right, Nick, good job, man.
All right, thanks, Mike. Have a good one. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right, he's back tomorrow here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City, and streaming live video on the X platform and on the YouTube channel at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe and watch the show live over there. Nick's Nuggets are brought to you by the Fanatic Sportsbook at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. We were there yesterday. The place was awesome. Watching that game. See, I don't get to see a lot of live sports while we're there. Having a game live yesterday gave you the feel of what that place must be like for a live Sunday, Saturday football game. So check that out. Hey, this hour, I want to thank our friends over at Jersey Cal. If you haven't been to Jersey Cal, it's a great time to go, because if you go in the summer, you're waiting in line. I would imagine the lines are a little shorter this time of the year, because ice cream's a year-round thing at Jersey Cal. They're open every day from noon to 10. So why not check them out? And they're great fall flavors. They're bringing back some popular classics, and they got some future flavors that they're bringing back as well. It's the best ice cream in the area. Northfield, Brigantine, Jersey Cal brings you the 4 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash. We're rolling along, and when we come back, one thought. Every game, all the games are in the books. What did Casey Joyner see? That's next.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort studio, here's Mike Gill.
Nick Sirianni's not great. We know that. He needs to stop talking. But when it boils down to it, you have a quarterback that is pointing the finger a lot more than he is pointing the thumb, and he's not doing it in a productive way when you're trying to hold guys accountable. And that's a problem.
Chris Carlin says it's more Hurts than it is Sirianni that's the issue with this team. We'll get one thought every game, and, of course, extra thoughts on the Eagles' loss in Tampa to the Buccaneers. Casey Joyner from The Athletic is here as we take a look at the Eagles. 33-16, they lose in Tampa. The score really not indicative, Casey. The game was ugly. It was ugly as the Eagles lose, and we'll, of course, bring in Casey Joyner from The Athletic for one thought every game, as we do each and every Tuesday and Thursday, and they're brought to you by Cooper University Healthcare. They're doing something extraordinary for families down the shore at Cooper University Healthcare, and there he is. If you're watching the live video on the X platform and YouTube, Casey Joyner is with me here on the Sports Bash. Well, Casey, Thursday we look at one thought every game. We talked about what we thought the Eagles, it didn't go the way they planned it. A lot of short, quick passes. And today, Vic Fangio said, we were a little surprised by their game plan. Should they have been?
Yeah, frankly, I can make an argument both ways. You'd think that they would go vertical, but Baker Mayfield he was 28th in vertical passes per game coming into that contest. It's right around there. He's near the bottom of the league. Because I wrote about it for The Athletic and seeing why in the world aren't the Bucs throwing the ball more? How's it impacting the receivers from a fantasy perspective? And they should have seen that. These guys are dink and dunking. The dink and dunking wasn't the problem. The game planning wasn't the problem. It's, can you guys tackle? Can you look like you want to tackle? Bill Belichick has said many times that his dad and Bill Parcells both told him the most important thing on defense is to have 11 guys who can tackle, that you better have 11 tacklers. If you don't, you're going to lose games. And that's what happened. They don't tackle well. That's how you fall behind 21-0. They throw dink and dunk throws.
Yeah, so you're down 21-0. Nick Sirianni said, hey, we were down 21-0. We only ran 6 plays. What did you think of what they were trying to do and what happened on offense with Philadelphia's game plan there? Obviously, they're down Lane Johnson, A.J. Brown, Smith, Britton Covey. They're down their top 3 receivers plus their right tackle. But offensively, they got nothing going.
They got nothing going. I got the impression once they started to fall behind, I think it impacted the way that they ran their game plan. It's hard to say when you only run that many plays, but here's the thing. If you fall down 7-0, there are coaches. I did a study years ago where, like Mike Shanahan, one time, anytime his team got down 7-0, he just abandoned the run and he started to throw immediately, even though he's a run-based team. You don't have to abandon the run when you get down 7-0 or 14-0 early in the game. You still have 8, 9 possessions left, even operating in that type of an offense. So you can still slow things down, maybe make that 10. You've got possessions left. You're down 2 possessions. You got the better in defense, but you don't have to abandon it. I got the impression once they fell behind 14-0, the Eagles were like, okay, hey, we got to try and change your game. But it's like, no, you really don't. You can still do the same thing you came into the game planning to do. You can't get rattled by it. And I got the impression the Eagles were getting just a little bit rattled by that.
Yeah, you look at, I want to get your thoughts on the game that Hurts is playing here. I mean, are we looking at Hurts? You heard what Chris Carlin said before you came on. He said, hey, too much blame into the coach and people looking at the coach. Do you look at Jalen Hurts and saying he's got to be better?
Yeah, when they were making the comeback there, they got down and they were driving and the 25-yard line, and he's in the pocket and trying to make a play, and then the ball gets stripped and they get the ball back. That's kind of like the end of the comeback. It's one of those things where you're in that kind of a comeback situation, you really need to make sure you're protecting the ball every time. You're in 4-down territory. You don't, if it's 4th down, I get it, but you've got to be able to protect the ball in those situations. You got to be able to do other things, and I still don't think they're using him in the ground game enough. I mean, the Barkley had that great run, although it was just a terrible, terrible play by Tampa. They didn't play that run properly, that 159-yard run that Barkley had. But I think that they need to incorporate his rushing skills in there. I think that he wants to be a passing quarterback, and they need to get him back to say, well, how about you be Lamar Jackson, and you can still run the ball 75 times a year, and you can throw for 30 touchdowns. Don't think you just have to be a drop-back passer. And I think there might be some pushback. If I had to guess, there's some pushback behind the scenes as to how things want to go there. And Hurts just needs to get on board with, hey, we need both your skills. We can't just have you as a passer.
Well, that, and, Barkley, he has, you just alluded to the big run that he had to start the second half. They had 1 carry after that the rest of the way. He led the team with 84 yards, but it seemed that even when they got down 14-0, he was not a part of the offense at all.
No, he wasn't. And again, there's nothing. I'm not knocking what the Eagles were doing, but on the running play, there's some bad. They didn't play it properly. The Bucs defense didn't. And then if you do it against Barkley, you're going to give up big gains. It's like, okay, well, how about you make sure that you try and do those things again, because he had 2 carries by 5 minutes left in the second quarter. I mean, yeah, you're not getting that many offensive plays, but that game plan needed to be about Barkley and Hurts, and it needed about those two. Grinding the ball out and getting 30, 35 plus carries. That's why I picked them to win last week, because I figured that's what they're going to do, and they're not doing that. I thought you'd see a kind of game plan that would incorporate the things that they do. In fact, I really think that you can't make big changes in midseason. I think the Eagles would do well to go look at what the Ravens are doing with Jackson and Derrick Henry, because they're finding ways now. They're starting to get into a groove of, this is how we integrate Henry's skill set with Jackson's skill set, how we can have certain types of running plays and how things can play off each other. You've got to meld them together to get a very careful way you got to do it. I think they need to look at that, because right now it seems like they're saying Hurts is going to be a passer, and then we're going to have him do some runs, and then Barkley's going to do some runs. That's not complementary. They're not having the things work together with each other. And when you've got competing game plan elements, what happened last week is what'll happen if you give up some plays in defense.
Casey Joyner, one thought every game. Let's get into what we saw on week 4 of the NFL, starting with New Orleans and Atlanta. Atlanta comes back. They're down. They come back. They win it at home, 26-24, and the Saints have lost 2 straight, and Atlanta is back to 2-2.
Saints are not as good offensively as we thought. Carr is looking like, well, Derek Carr. He's not anywhere near as good. Kamara being hurt, I think, is a big part of it. He came in that game with a ribs and a hip injury, and if you lose his big playability, he got 770 yards, rushing yards. He still led the game, but if he's not that breakaway threat, I think it really changes what there's an entire team, because that's what their offense is built around.
One thought every game, the Rams, they're beat up and they go on the road and they lose to the Bears, who get to 2-2. The Rams fall to 1-3.
They do. You can't lose. You just keep losing as many players as they are losing, and they could do a lot of things. A very creative play calling is keeping their offense going, and they still got 94 yards out of Williams and 224 out of Stafford. And they got 82 out of Tutu Atwell. You remember what we did last year, but they're incorporating him in there. But the Bears have got to give them credit that they're playing a lot better defense, and they're finally getting to figure out what they have with Caleb Williams. It's taking a little longer, obviously, than Washington has with Jaden Daniels, but I think his trend is moving up.
One thought every game, Minnesota might be for real. They went on the road into Green Bay, win the division game, and withstood Jordan Love throwing for almost 400 yards.
Jordan Love, that's just, I had him on a fantasy bench. He's not going to be on the bench on my fantasy team at all again this year after doing that. He's banged up and going against Minnesota with what they've been doing. That's just fantastic. And to be able to do what he did, but the Vikings, Sam Darnold, I do an MVP odds article every week, and he's right near the favorites now. He's like plus 1,300, and he is a perfect fit for the offense. Look, now he's got Jordan Addison to go with everything else. The Vikings, they're for real. I think I wouldn't, if you had you said Super Bowl odds right now, I'd say they're the NFC favorite.
Oh, wow. By the way, the Super Bowl odds did come out a little earlier for them, and they have gone from 28-1 to 14-1. They're not quite the favorite. Detroit is still ahead of them, and San Francisco, but Minnesota is now the 3rd shortest odds in the NFC. By the way, 4th, Philadelphia at 16-1. So Vegas doesn't think that Philadelphia has cratered out quite yet. One thought every game, Pittsburgh, what happened to their defense against Indianapolis? Oh, by the way, they didn't have to face Anthony Richardson. It was a real quarterback.
Imagine that. Flacco tears that team apart. Their defense did not play well. Their defense, they played well, but they'd also played some infos, and to go over there against Indianapolis and Flacco, why isn't Flacco a starting quarterback? I don't understand this. He leads Cleveland to the playoffs last year. What he does here, there's a lot of teams right now. I can look at a number of teams and go, I know it's short term, but he would be a better quarterback. But can you imagine Denver with that defense? Can you imagine? I know Denver, we'll talk about them in a second. I know they're playing better. But can you imagine how they might have done the whole game and things? If you could sit Bo Nix for a few games or a season and do that, I don't understand why Joe Flacco's not out there, because he's the story of that game.
One thought every game. Denver. How about Denver? 10-9. They've won back-to-back games on the road. I don't know if the story is more Denver winning back-to-back or what's up with the Jets. And now it just came out, that Garrett Wilson is frustrated in the offense. He says they're not trying to do enough things there. So you got a lot of wide receivers complaining around the league.
Yeah, offense is real bad this year. Rodgers, after the game, said that both of his legs were hurting. I read where he said both of his legs were hurting. That'll happen when you're in your 40s and you're trying to play a quarterback. Remember, there's only 2 quarterbacks in NFL history who are aged, the 41 season, they're throwing 500 or more passes in the season. And it was Warren Moon who did it once, and Tom Brady did it. And Rodgers, okay, maybe he can get there and things, but 40-0 quarterbacks is tough to do. He doesn't look like he was trending better, but he doesn't look like what he was in Broncos. Hey, they've got a really good defense. They've got some talent on offensive leagues, but this is a team that if you can't go against their defense, they can win 10-9 games, a few of them this year.
One thought every game, big shootout, Cincinnati, Carolina. Cincinnati finally gets a win on the road. I guess Carolina is showing, hey, we're at least a competitive football team. You're not going to come down here and just automatically walk in with a win, but it's a win that Cincinnati needed.
Yeah, Carolina, you've got, again, winless, but they're trending in the right direction now that they have solid quarterback play. Because it's like, hey, the rest of their team they're still a pretty bad team, but that gives them a chance to be competitive. But yeah, for Cincinnati, Jamar Chase, holdout and all that, did not look good in week 1. In fact, Cincinnati, think about it now. That New England loss is just looking worse by the week. It's just, that should be a 2-2 club, and that loss may come back to haunt them all year. But Burrow's looking back to what he does. Chase looking back to what he does. Higgins is back. They're starting to get healthy. But the problem with the Bengals, they've got a really banged up defensive front, and they're going to get in a lot of shootouts if they can shore that up.
One thought every game. Jacksonville looked like they were finally going to win a game, and then here comes C.J. Stroud, 345 yards. Houston, they come back to win it. Jacksonville 0-4. All the questions for Doug Peterson, and then he says, hey, we can put you in position, but we can't make the plays for you. The heat is on. Doug Peterson, Houston wins.
It's a tough thing for ownership and management when you've got a coach and a quarterback, and if they're not meshing, and we know that Peterson's really good coach. Again, he's got a Super Bowl win, and we know he's a solid coach. And Lawrence, now all the questions of, okay, is he what everybody thought he was? He's not a franchise quarterback. And if you're Jacksonville, you can fire the coach. That's fine. You can move on from him. But if Lawrence isn't your answer, you're going to have to move on from him too. And if you've got a good coach and your quarterback's not there, maybe you need to do something else. But Jacksonville, they just don't have the answers to the questions. And right now, the C.J. Stroud, he's one of those MVP candidates as well. 345. And again, I don't think Houston is playing as well as they're capable. I think they're still playing well, not playing as well as their talent level is. This team could be even better. And if they are, that's a scary proposition in the AFC.
I agree with you. I think Houston still has more in them. All right. What about Washington? They go to Arizona. The game's not a fair fight. 42-14. Jaden Daniels' numbers don't pop off the page, but Washington dominates the game in the desert.
He has been a phenom. He's right now, if you say offensive rookie of the year, okay, it's him and who else? It's absolutely him. He's playing fantastic. His completion rates are out of this world. He's getting up to where, again, mentioned the NFL MVP article. He's right up there. He's there's favorites and long shots. He's in the long shot section. It won't take long for him to play like he did, and he'll be in contention for MVP. He's playing that well. They didn't have to have him have off the charts numbers because Arizona is really that bad. They're a well-coached team, but they still have they've got talent issues.
One thought every game. San Francisco banged up. They did get Debo back, but Brock Purdy had a good game. Juwan Jennings has another good game. Oh, by the way, Christian McCaffrey, no problem. Jordan Mason has a big game.
Mason has a good game. Kittle had a good game. They're getting people back. And again, they didn't have to have people have to have a big game. They haven't really incorporated Ayuk. They're another team to where, they win 30-13. But imagine if I get Ayuk fully incorporated. Imagine if Debo gets back being healthy. If Kittle stays healthy, you get McCaffrey back. This is still a team that could ascend upwards. But to show that they did what they did, they should win that game 30-13 from a talent perspective. And to do that says, okay, the 49ers, we're worried about them, about how they played so far this year, but they're leveling off to where they should be, and that's good news for them.
One thought every game. Casey Joyner from The Athletic. Couple more to go. Cleveland and Vegas. Vegas wins at home. All the problems there. DeAndre Adams. All right. Devontae Adams, excuse me. He wants to be traded, but they won without him down there. Cleveland. The problems continue for the Browns.
They do, and it's partly injury and partly that. But you go over their talent level. You got Elijah Moore. You didn't have a Njoku, but you've got him. You've got Ford. Now you're going to get some players back, and you've got the quarterback. You've got Deshaun Watson. So you've got a lot of different things. You go, okay, this should be a talented team, and they're not. I just think that it's a matter of Stefanski has a certain type of thing he wants to do, and the talent for the team is something different. And I think again, why did you guys let Flacco go? Why didn't you keep him? Because right now you could put him in there and you could solidify your situation, and you might be done with Watson, but maybe you need to be, because I think I think we're seeing every week that experiment's not working out.
It's amazing that these teams, the amount of ineptitude decision making they make is crazy to me. To say that, hey, we can't bring Flacco back because Deshaun Watson might be a little hurt by that. Are you serious? Read the room, Deshaun Watson. You haven't been very good for the money. The ROI hasn't been there. Kansas City and the Chargers, all sorts of injuries, but they hung around this game, but Kansas City keep finding ways to win as they continue to lose bodies.
There are three players who have had one turnover in every game this year. Patrick Mahomes is one of them.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts is the other.
Yeah, I forget the third one is. There's three, and he's one of them. And Will Levis is now added to that list. So, I mean, that's bad company. That's what Mahomes is playing like right now, and they're winning in spite of it. I mean, it's like, yeah, the Chargers are banged up, and you look at the Chiefs' schedule, it's like, this is not the toughest schedule. They keep looking, okay, now you've got the Rice injury, Kelsey's still not playing well, and now you're going to Kareem Hunt. Okay, a little bit better, but, I mean, that's going to be your ground game. Kansas City's got some problems, and the Chargers weren't, there are too many injuries to be able to take advantage of that. But if the Chiefs keep getting a few more injuries like this, or if the attrition starts hitting it a little bit more, I think the idea that they're just dominant team, I can see a number of teams right now in the league be better than them, even though they're undefeated.
One thought, every game, Sunday night, Baltimore 35, they blast the Bills 35-10. It was Derrick Henry, almost 200 yards rushing in the game. It looks like Baltimore has found their way, and the Bills finally fell back to the pack.
They did, and then that first run, I went back and watched it. I got the coaching film and thing. I watched all that first run, that Henry, that long touchdown. Bills don't want anything to do with tackling him. Their secondary players, you did not want anything. Rasul Douglas, I think you could see he's just like, I do not want to have to tackle this guy one-on-one. Don't make me do this. It was a thing of beauty, but they can do what they do. They've got the power running that they can do. They can incorporate their passing game and such. That's a big thing for them. And I still don't understand, though. He's got 199 yards. Why aren't you calling timeouts? Why aren't you trying to get the ball back for him to get one more yard so he can set the record for 200-yard games? He was tied for first at 6, and Derrick Henry could have had 7. It's one of those things where come on, guys, get him that extra yard. Do what you have to get him that extra yard. It means going for a 4th down. You were up 35-10. You didn't need to score any more points.
One thought, every game, Monday night, doubleheader. One game, really good. This one, not so much. Tennessee, all over Miami. The quarterback situation in Miami so bad. Yet, Huntley had 96 yards, which was the best passer in that game, and they still lost. I don't know how that's even possible, that you win a game where your quarterback doesn't even throw for 100 yards, and they didn't win. They won handily.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. And you look at it's, what is it, 2.7 yards per play. It's really, I mean, they're not good if you're playing that 4-string quarterback who doesn't really know your offense. McDaniels are really creative. Again, McDaniel, why did you go in this season? You had Tua, and then you didn't have anybody as a backup, and you know Tua's not the most durable guy. Why don't you get a Flacco? Why don't you get somebody like that? Belichick said something a couple of weeks ago where he was talking about that a team that has any team that, like he was talking about the Steelers saying, hey, you got Russell Wilson as a good backup in case Fields gets hurt. Said they have one of the best quarterback situations in the league. I think he's one of the guys who realizes you can't have a lousy backup. I've said for years, the Raiders back in the 70s, when they had LaMonica, they had Blanda, and they had Stabler. They had the great starter, they had a Hall of Fame backup, and they had a guy in development. That's what you want. That should be your goal. And right now the Dolphins had one guy who barely would make that list. I don't understand it, because this is what's going to happen to you, Miami, if you lose that starter who tends to get hurt.
And the other game last night, one thought, every game, Seattle-Detroit, what an entertaining game. Back and forth they go. Geno Smith, almost 400 yards. Kenneth Walker had a big game. DK Metcalf had a big game, but it wasn't enough. Detroit wins 42-29. Jared Goff, we're still waiting for him to throw an incomplete pass.
Yeah, we definitely are. And the Seahawks had 38 first downs. The NFL record's 40. I mean, they were that close to the NFL record for first downs, and yet they still only scored 29 points, which is, I mean, it's a lot. But, I mean, if you're putting up 38 first downs, you'd think you'd score more. The Lions were able to do some bend but don't break, but the Lions showing we can run the ball, we can pass the ball. If we got to get in the shootout, we can. The Lions don't want to be in this sort of situation and it seems like that's where they are, because Carlton Davis wasn't the answer at cornerback. And they should have known that too. His pass coverage metrics were not the kind to say, hey, he's our shutdown guy. But the Lions are showing they can win shootouts, but they got to not get in them. But Mike McDonald, if you're him, you got to be really worried, because you thought you had a really good defense. And then I know the Lions are good, but 42, you go back to drawing board, because you got to do a lot better than that.
All right. One thought, every game. Casey Joyner from The Athletic. He'll be back on Thursday as we get ready for week 5 of the NFL, which all starts on Thursday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. NFC South, Tampa and Atlanta is your Thursday night game. We kick into the London games this week, so we'll have 9:30 football on Sunday, and that all starts right here on 97.3 ESPN. Casey, we will see you on Thursday.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, there he is. Casey Joyner, everybody, from The Athletic. And, of course, one thought, every game. We do it Tuesdays and Thursdays. He's brought to you by Cooper University Healthcare. They're doing something extraordinary for families down the shore at Cooper University Healthcare. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at Mike Gill Show, and of course on the YouTube channel. I think, we look back at all the games there and just kind of go through them real quick, but one of the more interesting stories has got to be Minnesota. All of a sudden, Minnesota feels for real. And by the way, when you look at the MVP odds right now, Mahomes is the favorite. Josh Allen is number 2. Lamar Jackson is number 3. Sam Darnold's number 4. Is Sam Darnold, in your mind, a legitimate MVP candidate? Well, 9-1 says, yeah, he's definitely. And if that team's for real, I'd throw some money on him as fast as I could. Because if they're for real and you believe that team's for real, he's going to be in this conversation the rest of the season now.
I mean, yes, if they stay on the pace they're on winning-wise, he has to be in the
conversation. The only reason they wouldn't would be what? What is something you would say, I don't believe in this team? What would be the thing that makes you not believe in them? Because they got really good weapons. Their offensive line is much better than it's been, which has always been their problem. Their defense is excellent. So if it's something that you're saying, I'm not believing in them, what would it be?
It would actually be the defense, because I do think at some point somebody is going to get enough tape on these guys to figure out how to adjust. So then it's the question of how do you adjust to the adjustment, right? It's like if you're a pitcher, Mike, and you have an amazing start to the season, right? For the first 2 months of the year, you're 5-0, you got a 1.10 ERA. And they get that one team that knocks you around. So then how many starts it take you to get back on track? That's my question with the Vikings. At some point, that defense will come back down to the mean, and then what happens?
Well, if that's the problem, it wouldn't be the quarterback. And if it's the defense, can the quarterback with Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, that's a good group right there.
And remember, T.J. Hawkinson will come back for the second half of the season.
I like their defense, by the way. Tillery, Phillips. I really like what Van Ginkel has done. Gilmore, Harrison Smith, Byron Murphy.
I would say Gilmore, I think, has been the guy we haven't talked enough about when it comes to Vikings, because remember, he was on the scrap heap. He was like a guy that people were like, can Gilmore play anymore? The Cowboys don't want him. And the Vikings were like, come on down. We can use you. And boy, he has really paid off for that.
This hour of the Sports Bash is brought to you by Key Acura of Atlantic City. For a great car buying experience, go see Rocco and the team at Key Acura of Atlantic City, Tilton Road in Egg Harbor Township. Your small but friendly dealer online at Key Acura of AtlanticCity.com. Don't forget, you can listen to every pitch of the Phillies Red October right here on 97.3 ESPN. It starts Saturday and Sunday. Phillies baseball. By the way, coming up at 6 o'clock tonight, we've got Mets and Brewers, followed by Braves and Padres. Red October is on 97.3 ESPN.
It's the Sports.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm.
Do you find yourself stuck in a timeshare? Get the real facts about the timeshare industry and your options for cancellation. Chuck McDowell, founder of Wesley Financial Group, has put together a free information guide that reveals the secrets the timeshare industry doesn't want you to know, including the 5 ways to get rid of your timeshare. Get this timeshare cancellation guide absolutely free.
Get your free guide at iCancelTimeshare.com. That's iCancelTimeshare.com. iCancelTimeshare.com.
Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Que corazón, mi corazón.
5:31 Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Big 3 today. Brought to you by Broadleaf's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Your trusted source for heating and plumbing service and installation for generations. Call 609-390-3907. Online, broadleafs.net. So if this first baseball playoff game is indicative of about what we're about to get in the baseball playoffs, it's going to be nuts. It was 3-0 Detroit. And now it is 3-1 with 2 on and 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th.
With a starting pitcher in there to close the game for the Tigers. Let's go Brisky.
The Astros bunted first and second. They bunted the 2 guys over to get second and third with 1 out. The next hitter sliced one down the left field side. A great play by Riley Green in left field. He held the runner, and now it's second and third with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, and the 2-2 pitch is about to go. It's a full count now.
Oh, my goodness. This is getting more wild.
Full count. This is unbelievable, the way that these games have been going, by the way. Let's see what ends up happening here. Second and third.
I mean, the crowd is just, the nerves are through the roof. Like, can you imagine the anxiety of that crowd right now?
Well, they're down 3-0 in the ninth. They actually got
one,
and now have the tying run at second base.
Remember, they had a different pitcher on the mound. That's why they brought in Brisky to save the game. This is a postseason save for a starting pitcher.
Over in the other game, by the way, Kansas City leads Baltimore 1-0. So he walks, the bases loaded. It was bases loaded now. 2 outs, bottom of the ninth. This is
premier postseason drama.
And this is the first game of the postseason. Detroit 3-1. In the other game, Kansas City 1, Baltimore nothing. That game is in Baltimore. At 6 o'clock tonight, we will take you to the Mets and Brewers, Game 1. And then tonight, following that game, we will take you to San Diego for the Braves and Padres. You can listen to the 2 National League wildcard games right here on 97.3 ESPN. By the way, the Braves have left Chris Sale off the wild card roster. So he is not on the roster, not available to pitch at all in these games.
So are we assuming then the back spasms was not just a way to get him out to pitch yesterday?
I would have to imagine. If he's not pitching today, you would think that, yes, he was being truthful, that his back spasms were real.
I mean, can they win without him?
Good question. You know, I would say that their pitching is a strength of their team as opposed to, now they used Schellenbach yesterday.
Right.
And now they don't have Sale. So that's their 2 of their top guys. They do have Fried.
And Lopez.
Right, and Lopez. But 2 of their top guys are now probably out for this series.
And if it's a Game 3, do you go with Old Man Morton and hope for the best?
Yeah, I don't know how their rotation is set up now. I don't know who's pitching tomorrow for them.
By the way, Jason Hayward at bat. How many teams?
Talk about old man.
Talk about how many teams this guy's been on.
Said Old Man Morton. How about Old Man Hayward here with a chance? It's bases loaded, 2 outs at the bottom of the ninth. It's 3-1 at Detroit. It was 3-0 to start this inning.
Skubal had a great outing for the Tigers.
Yeah, and so did who came in relief. He came in and had 4 strikeouts. He came in, I can't think of his name right now, but I'm blanking on his name. But that's why the bullpen, man, that Detroit bullpen, the second half of the season reminds me a little bit of like what Kansas City had when they won that World Series in 2015, I guess it was. So it's a 1-1 count. And that's low. If he walks in a run here, holy mackerel.
By the way, Fried is supposed to go tomorrow for the Braves. There was currently not somebody scheduled for Game 3.
Smith-Shawver's pitching tonight. They don't have a pitcher listed. And who's pitching for the Mets? Severino's pitching today. And Manaea tomorrow. And they have no pitchers undecided.
I mean, I guess you could go Lopez Game 3 then. So
yeah, they have a couple options. But obviously not having Sale and then having to use Schellenbach yesterday, not ideal for them.
Not ideal for the Padres to have Cease wait until Game 3. I mean, I would have him go.
Oh, that ball smoked, and he catches it right at Torkelson. So Detroit gets out of it, and they're going to win Game 1. By the way, teams that have won Game 1 in these new 3-game series have won every single series.
Wow. So you're saying that maybe you might see the Tigers in the next round.
The Tigers, and right now, the Orioles. The Orioles are up. Not the Orioles. The Royals. The Royals are up 1-0.
Royals, okay. All right. Well, speaking of baseball, Mike, for the big 3, I wanted to start with Hembo. Hembo, big baseball guy, right? Well, he is also an Eagles fan, and he had this to say about Nick Sirianni and the Eagles earlier today on Greeny.
The whole point of retaining Nick Sirianni and not hiring a legitimate head coach is to be able to do more with less when needed. I've seen Matt LaFleur win back-to-back games with Malik Willis as his quarterback, who wasn't a quarterback a year ago. I saw the Rams beat San Francisco without Cooper Kupp and without Puka Nacua. That's what real coaches do. That's what real quarterbacks do. I'm not here for it. The NFL is filled with injuries every single year, every single team.
That's the best case I could make. If you want to be critical of Sirianni, you can be critical in that manner. That, to me, is pragmatic breakdown. You've got other teams that have injury now, to be fair. Did he mention McVay? No.
He did mention McVay,
okay, because they're 1-3.
But he said they won the game without Puka Nacua, without Cooper Kupp, without their one of their starting
But they've been
offensive
competitive, too.
They've been very competitive.
I have no issue with what he just said, is if you want your head coach to elevate through tough times, that's fair. That's fine.
Yeah, if that is your reason why you don't want Sirianni to be the coach, I'm okay with that because you're giving me, Mike, an objective, tangible example. I can't buy into the person. Like, I had somebody try to tell me on Sunday, Mike, that they should fire Sirianni because of his antics. And I'm just like, I don't care about the antics. Because if you're winning, who cares about the antics?
Yeah, I'm not really here to judge whether I like him on or off the field in terms of his press conferences, what he says. That I don't really care about. You know, he had the whole thing with the flowers and the seeds and planting stuff, and they went to the Super Bowl.
And they went on a winning streak after he said that.
Yeah, so that type of rhetoric I really don't care about. But that, to me, is fair. What he's saying is, okay, this league is filled. Look, the Raiders. Nobody thinks that Raiders team is any good. And they lost Max Crosby, probably their best defensive player.
100%.
Adams did not play in that game.
Correct.
Definitively their best offensive player.
100%.
And they won a game. Now you can say, well, they played Cleveland.
And by the way, they won a game on the road at Baltimore, too.
They won a game on the road at Baltimore. I think Crosby played in that game, but some of the injury issues that they had.
Nobody picked the Raiders to win that game.
No, but his point is
teams are winning despite adversity.
They're having injury issues, but that's not holding back Matt LaFleur and figuring out game plans and ways to win. I think that's fair.
And by the way, let's throw in the 49ers, too. They have not played with Christian McCaffrey at all this year, and they're still finding ways to win games. We know that other teams can win. So what is the reason then why, Mike, Sirianni can't?
Fair question. I think it's a fair question as to ask why these other teams. Now, listen, if you were to ask me, who do I like better as a coach, LaFleur or Sirianni? I have a clear answer on that. I like LaFleur.
100%.
I don't know about Antonio Pierce enough. I mean, he came in midseason last year.
He's very new.
Yeah. I mean, to me, Sirianni is probably middle of the road, if that, as a head football coach. I mean, he is more of a culture guy, more of as Jason Kelce would say, a guy that motivates. If you're saying, what are the strong suits of him? What does he do? People ask. Well, that's what he's more known for. He's more known for the motivation, culture building, more so than calling plays, et cetera, et cetera.
Speaking of Sirianni, Michael Lombardi says, people talk a lot about Sirianni, but maybe somebody else deserves some criticism. This is from the GM Shuffle podcast.
Everybody's giving Sirianni Well, you just hired Kellen Moore to be the greatest offensive coach since Vince Lombardi left the Giants, and he hasn't scored a goddamn point in the first quarter. I mean, where's his game plan? When does he get called on the carpet?
Eagles are the only team in the NFL who have not scored a point in the first quarter of this season, Mike.
I'm going to hold judgment on the offense and their shortcomings and when they're back to full strength.
The Browns have scored a point in the first quarter of every game this year.
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing, they haven't scored in the first quarter. I mean, you've played 4 games. Now, if we're halfway through the season and you still haven't scored a point in the first quarter, then we can start to look back at this. But it's really hard for me to make an assessment. Like, again, this is like if the Sixers play without Joel Embiid for the first 25 games and you said to me, what do you think of the Sixers offensively? Well, they don't have Joel Embiid. What do you want me to say? That's not who they are.
Sure.
This is not who the Eagles are offensively yet. You have an offense that's supposed to have Brown and Smith, and you've only had Smith, really, and then you didn't have him this week. So I don't know what they are offensively. I don't know what they're supposed to be. I can't sit here and say, now I would say I probably want to lean on Saquon more. They've done that a little bit, except for this past week. I don't like the way they used him this past week, but I think overall he was on pace for, record amount of touches. So I'll reserve judgment on their offense until I get more of a sample size.
I do think that
because, by the way, real quick, not to cut you off, but if I was to judge the Saints after 2 games, wouldn't I think they were really good?
You would.
And that would be probably jumping the gun on that.
You were. Well, a lot of people were. A lot of people were jumping the gun.
But that's why I don't think it's fair to make these assertions after 4 games, especially, one game you have Brown and Smith, and you look pretty good offensively, right?
You did. My opinion is I like what he said, though, because he's right. A lot of people keep talking about Sirianni, but the whole reason why Kellen Moore is here is because it's not Sirianni's offense. He's not calling the game plan. He's not building the script, right? How many times have guys like Colin Thompson and other guys talk to you, Mike, here about, the first 20 plays are scripted, right? So Sirianni's not building the script. He's not walking in with the first 20 plays. It's Kellen Moore. And so I have to wonder, for a team that has not been able to score early in games, they have not gotten off the hot starts. They've had an issue of getting themselves in a rhythm early in the game. Is there something to be said for the fact that Kellen Moore deserves a little bit of a side eye here?
Sure. If you want to take those things into consideration and just say, I'm only going to judge you on what I saw, not the big picture, then that's fair. Because I'm more of a big picture guy.
Yeah.
I say, look, if you told me before the season this is what he was dealing with, I would say to you, my expectations are low. So why would I be critical of him? If this was his offense, I would say my expectations are low. That's if you said to me before the year, Kellen Moore's the offensive coordinator. Okay, what does he have offensively? Well, he has Jahan Dotson, Paris Campbell.
Sure.
I would say then this team's not going to be very good.
But on the flip side, Hembo just brought up Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur. These are guys who are head coaches and offensive play callers. Kellen Moore doesn't have to worry about being a head coach.
He's also not a head coach. He's an offensive play caller.
But doesn't that mean he should be able to at least be good enough?
Well, I'm not suggesting that Kellen Moore is on the same level as a play caller as those guys.
So then should he be the offensive coordinator?
Oh, how many guys are on the same? What kind of question is that? How many? That's like saying, can I get Patrick Mahomes? No, there's one of those guys.
Right.
I don't think Kellen Moore, just because he's not on the level of those guys, means that he's Anthony Richardson.
Right. That's true. Good point.
So, yeah, I would like to have the best. I don't have the best. I have a guy that I think is pretty good. It's like the NFL. There's Patrick Mahomes. There's Josh Allen. And then I think there's a lot of other guys who are pretty good, but they're not on the same level as those guys. And just because you have them doesn't mean that you can't win with them. I don't expect Kellen Moore to be Matt LaFleur or Sean McVay level.
Speaking of great head coaches, we mentioned the name Bill Belichick earlier today, Mike. Well, Bill Belichick on the Pat McAfee show, he gave McAfee his formula for the best way for the Eagles to win games.
Hopefully for them, they can get healthy, reset a little bit, get back to playing, good Philadelphia Eagle football. And that means getting off to a good start and playing from ahead. Just trying to play catch up and throw the ball all over the lot, 45 times all is just not a good formula for any team. But I don't think that's really the way the Eagles want to play or should play.
No, and especially when you're missing your 2 weapons in the pass game. You want to play with the lead and then be able to use Saquon Barkley to run the football and lean on that. When you are missing 3 players, we keep forgetting that Covey was really the third receiver at the start of the season on this team. Not to mention when Lane Johnson goes out and then the replacement, the stats on him, he had 13 quarterback pressures that he allowed on Sunday. That's tough, man.
Yeah. But I do think that Belichick brings up an interesting point because, we have been frustrated with the pass rush. Would the pass rush look differently, Mike, if they were playing from ahead instead of playing catch-up?
Would the Eagles' pass rush look different?
Yeah.
You would hope so.
I mean,
I just don't think they're like, this is going back to training camp.
Yeah.
We just didn't think they were very good. They were going to, and we talked about it with Kaplan earlier today. We just didn't think their pass rush, we thought it was going to be a problem. And it is a problem.
And whose fault is that?
Well, you're not getting what you thought out of Huff.
Yeah.
You're not getting what you used to get from Sweat.
Mm-hmm.
Your internal push hasn't been what you would want from, Carter showed you one game. He was not as good last week, obviously. And is that because teams are saying, you're the only guy you got, so we're going to double and triple you?
I mean, they were double and triple teaming him, and you would hope that in those situations, though, someone else would step up.
Yeah, well, they don't have the talent. The Huff signing has been a major whiff. Let's be honest. It is what it is. That Huff signing has been a major whiff.
What is a bigger whiff, the Huff signing or Nnamdi Asomugha?
Fair question on both. We're awful.
10 years apart.
Although, Asomugha, you could at least say maybe he was just at the end of the road. Mm-hmm. Huff is a young player. That you thought the reason you didn't want to sign Reddick was because you thought he was too old to give the money to, so you would replace him and give the money to a younger player. And that has not worked out so far. All right, that's the big three brought to you today by Broadleaf's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Your trusted source for heating, plumbing service, and installation for generations. Call them 609-390-3907. Online, broadleafs.net. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Bet365 play of the day. We hit 3 out of 5 last night for some more moolah for you guys. And that is coming up next.
What makes Crystal Geyser Alpine Spring Water different? We always bottle our Alpine Spring Water less than 1.5 miles from the spring source. And we're also committed to sustainability. That means all our bottles are made with 50% recycled plastic from 2 of our very own recycling plants. So, when you want the best water nature has to offer, the choice is crystal clear. Crystal Geyser Alpine Spring Water, bottled at the spring source. Learn more at crystalgeyserplease.com.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
All right, get ready to get out of here on a Tuesday night. Thanks to Colin Thompson, John McMullen, Adam Kaplan, Casey Joyner. If you missed any of the show, you can go back on the live video stream on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe to the YouTube channel over there. On the X platform at Mike Gill Show, and you can go back to any segment of today's show. It's the Bet365 play of the day. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. How'd we do last night?
You got 3 out of 5, Mike. You got Tyler Boyd over yards, Laporta over receiving yards, and Amon-Ra St. Brown over receptions. You struck out on Tony Pollard and David Achane.
Yeah, Achane had 3 catches for like 14 yards.
He had a nothing game.
Pollard had a big game.
Pollard
rushing
had a
the
big
ball.
game, but you had him on the reception.
Yeah, I would say he had like 80 yards rushing.
He had all the rushing, another receiver.
Yeah. All right, tonight I'm going back to Carrington. 4 rebounds. She's done it 8 straight games in the WNBA playoffs tonight. Brianna Stewart with a 3. She's done that 9 out of 10. So I'll go Carrington, 4 more rebounds. Stewart will hit a 3 tonight. Put them together, see what you got. Probably a couple more bucks in your pocket. That's my Bet365 play of the day. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I want to thank my friends over at Kia Acura of Atlantic City. Rocco and the team have a great car buying experience. Go see them at Kia Acura on Silton Road in EHT, your small but friendly dealer. Online at KiaAcuraAtlanticCity.com. All right, coming up tomorrow, we'll get McGarry's take on the baseball playoffs. What great games, by the way. Kansas City up 1-0. Coming up next, it's Mets Brewers right here on 97.3 ESPN.
Shop Macy's VIP sale going on now. Use your coupon or Macy's card and take an extra 30% off the latest fall trends from designers that rarely go on sale. And save 15% off skincare, makeup, fragrances, and more. Plus, shop fall specials for even more great deals on top brands at Macy's. Savings off regular and already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.